At a luxury party, my wife's mother handed me a name badge. It read, Housekeeper. My wife laughed and said, stays for family. There was no chair for me at the table. I removed my wedding ring and set it down in front of 370 guests. They thought they'd put me in my place. They had no idea what I was about to do. The chandeliers at the Belmont Grand cast the kind of light that costs more than most people's cars. I know this because I designed the electrical system that powers them. Every circuit, every dimmer switch, every backup generator. I built the bones of this place before they hung crystal from the ceilings and called it luxury. That's what made the name badge so perfect, really. So precisely cruel. I was standing in the marble foyer when Victoria's mother pressed it into my palm. The plastic was still warm from the printer, the adhesive backing peeling at one corner. Eleanor Ashworth. Never Eleanor. Always Mrs. Ashworth. Even after 7 years of marriage to her daughter, smiled at me with all her teeth showing. The kind of smile that doesn't reach anywhere near the eyes. You'll need this, Marcus, she said. Her voice carrying that patrician accent she'd perfected despite growing up in a 2-bedroom ranch in Ohio. I'd seen the yearbook photos. Security is very particular about the guest list tonight. I looked down at the badge in my hand. Housekeeper. Not Marcus Reeves. Not guest. Not even staff. Housekeeper. The font was Arial, size 48, bold. Impossible to miss, impossible to mistake for anything other than what it was. A sign you'd hang around a dog's neck to let everyone know it wasn't house-trained. I think there's been a mistake, I said, my voice calm. I've always been good at calm. You don't become a master electrician by panicking when the current goes live. Oh, there's no mistake. Victoria appeared at her mother's elbow, radiant in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than the monthly mortgage on the house I'd bought for us. The house where I'd rewired every outlet myself, where I'd installed smart lighting in every room, because she'd mentioned once, casually, that she liked the idea of controlling the ambiance. Mother's right. They're very strict about identification. She was laughing, not loudly, not cruelly, just laughing. The way you laugh at a sitcom, at a joke you've heard before, but still find mildly amusing. I'd known Victoria for 9 years, married her 7 years ago in a small ceremony because she'd said she wanted intimate, wanted meaningful, wanted just us and the people we loved most. I'd carried her over the threshold of our first apartment, the one with the faulty wiring I'd spent 3 weekends fixing. I'd held her hair back when she had food poisoning from that sushi place on 10th Street. I'd built her a bookshelf from reclaimed wood for her birthday because she'd said she wanted something handmade, something with soul. I'd never heard her laugh at me before. Victoria, I started. It's a theme party, Marcus. She touched my arm, the way you'd steady a confused child. Everyone has a role. Mother is hosting. Daddy's the master of ceremonies. I'm the guest of honor. And you're... She glanced at the badge, and something flickered across her face. Not quite regret. More like the acknowledgement that yes, this is uncomfortable, but we're doing it anyway. You're helping out. I'm your husband, and we're so grateful you could help tonight. Mrs. Ashworth again, already turning away, her silver gown catching the light. The actual staff are overwhelmed. 370 guests, Marcus. This is the social event of the season. 370. I'd heard the number before, seen the spreadsheets Victoria left open on her laptop. But standing there in the foyer, watching the parade of tailored suits and designer dresses flowing past me, the number became real, became faces, became witnesses. Where do I sit? I asked. Victoria's smile faltered, just for a second, just long enough for me to see that she knew exactly what she was doing. "Food's for family," she said softly. Then, louder, as if she'd just thought of something. "But you can eat in the kitchen. The chef prepared extra for the staff. It's actually really good. You know how Chef Pierre is." I did know. I'd installed the ventilation system in his kitchen 3 months ago. He'd shaken my hand, called me a genius for solving the heat problem that had plagued the space for years. We'd shared coffee during breaks, talked about our kids. His daughter was starting college, wanted to be an engineer. "No chair at the table," I said. "Not a question." "There's not really room, honey." Victoria touched my arm again, and I noticed her ring finger. The diamond I'd saved for 9 months to buy, working double shifts and weekend emergency calls. The band I'd had engraved with the coordinates of where we first met, a coffee shop in the rain, both of us reaching for the last blueberry muffin, both of us laughing when our hands collided. She was wearing it now, wearing it while telling me there was no chair for me at her family's table. The thing about humiliation is that it doesn't hit all at once. It's not a punch to the gut. It's more like water filling a glass, drop by drop, until you realize you're drowning in something that accumulated so slowly, you never thought to stop it. "Marcus, don't be difficult." Mrs. Ashworth had returned, a champagne flute in her hand, ice cubes clinking against crystal. "You knew what tonight was when you agreed to come." I hadn't agreed. I'd been told. 2 weeks ago, dinner at their house, Victoria mentioning casually that her parents were throwing a little party for her promotion at the firm. Partner at 29, youngest in the company's history. I'd been proud. I'd kissed her forehead and asked what I could bring, what I could do to help celebrate. "Just be there," she'd said. I'd thought she meant as her husband. "Put on the badge, Marcus." Mrs. Ashworth's voice had edges now. "People are starting to notice." She was right. I could feel eyes sliding toward us, curious and quick, the way people look at a small scene brewing in a public place. The kind of attention that asks, "Is this interesting? Should I watch? Should I turn away?" I looked at the badge again, at the careful letters, the professional printing, the laminated surface that meant someone had planned this. Had thought about it, had decided, deliberately, to reduce me to a single word. Housekeeper. There's a moment in every electrical system when you're deciding whether to cut the main power. The building is still running, lights still on, everything functional. But you know something's wrong in the wiring. You know that if you don't shut it down now, carefully and completely, the damage will be catastrophic. Fires. Explosions. Destruction that spreads far beyond the initial fault. That moment is clarity. I peeled the backing off the badge. Victoria relaxed. Mrs. Ashworth's smile returned. Around us, the interested eyes moved on, found other things to watch, other dramas to consume. I pressed the badge onto my chest, right over my heart. The adhesive stuck to the fabric of my suit, the navy blue Tom Ford suit Victoria had insisted I buy for tonight. "You need to look the part," she'd said. I thought she meant her husband, her equal, her partner. I'd been wrong about what part I was playing. "There," Mrs. Ashworth said, satisfied. "Now you fit in." She walked away, trailing perfume and certainty. Victoria squeezed my hand once, quick and meaningless, before following. I watched them move into the ballroom, watched them absorbed into a crowd of people who belonged, who had chairs at tables, who wore badges that said guest or VIP or family. I stood in the foyer alone. The chandeliers hummed above me, a frequency most people can't hear, but I can. Have been able to since my first day as an apprentice electrician 15 years ago. The sound of power running through systems I understand completely. The sound of infrastructure holding everything up, invisible and essential, and taken entirely for granted. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne. His badge said staff. He glanced at mine, and something like pity crossed his face before he looked away. I walked into the ballroom. The space was transformed. I'd seen it empty 3 months ago when I was consulting on the lighting redesign. Now it was Eden after the decorator had finished. White roses in 10-foot arrangements, silk tablecloths the color of pearls, place settings that probably cost more than my first car. A string quartet played something classical and expensive sounding in one corner. At the far end, a podium waited with microphones and a screen for presentations. 370 people filled the room like water fills a pool, easily, naturally, taking up every inch of available space. They were beautiful people, successful people, people whose teeth were white and whose haircuts cost 3 figures and whose laughter sounded like music specifically composed for rooms like this. I found Victoria at the main table, elevated slightly on a platform. 16 seats, all filled. Her father at the head, her mother to his right, Victoria to his left. Cousins and aunts and uncles I'd met at holidays, who'd shaken my hand and asked about my work with what I'd thought was genuine interest. There was no 17th chair. I counted 3 times to be sure, walking the perimeter of the platform like I was checking circuit breakers. 16 chairs. 16 place settings. 16 names in calligraphy on ivory cards. Mine wasn't among them. Marcus, a voice from the crowd. Richard Chen, Victoria's colleague from the firm. We'd had drinks together maybe 5 times. Talked about sports and rising interest rates and nothing particularly meaningful. Hey man, congratulations to Victoria, right? This is incredible. He was looking at my badge. Yeah, I said. Incredible. Are you helping out tonight? That's cool of you. Eleanor's always so particular about these things. He leaned closer, conspiratorial. Between you and me, I think she's a little nuts about the details. But hey, whatever makes her happy, right? He walked away before I could respond. 3 more people stopped me in the next 10 minutes, all colleagues of Victoria's, all people I'd met before, at firm parties and holiday gatherings where Victoria had introduced me as my husband, Marcus, with her hand in mine and something like pride in her voice. Now, they looked at my badge and asked if I knew where the bathroom was, if I could find someone to refill the champagne, if the kitchen could accommodate a gluten-free request. None of them recognized me. Or maybe they did. Maybe they were just playing along with whatever game this was, whatever performance Victoria and her mother had choreographed. I returned to the platform. Dinner was being served, filet mignon and roasted vegetables, and something that looked like art on a plate. The family table ate and laughed and talked. Their conversation, a private symphony I couldn't hear from down here, off the stage, outside the circle. Victoria caught my eye once. Just once. She smiled, bright and automatic, the way you smile at a waiter or a valet or someone who's done exactly what they're supposed to do. Then she turned back to her conversation. I stood there for what might have been 5 minutes or 50. Time does strange things when you're drowning. When you're finally understanding something you should have seen much earlier, but the water was rising so slowly you thought you were still breathing fine. Someone tapped a glass. The room quieted. Victoria's father stood at the podium, handsome and silver-haired and comfortable with command. He'd owned a real estate empire before retiring at 60. He'd built it from nothing, he liked to say, though I'd learned from other sources that nothing meant a comfortable inheritance and family connections that opened every door in the city. Friends, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the excellent acoustics I'd helped design. Family, thank you for being here tonight to celebrate my daughter. Applause, genuine and warm. Victoria blushed prettily, waved a modest hand. Victoria has always been exceptional, her father continued. Even as a child, she knew what she wanted and how to get it. She set her sights on partner at Whitmore and Associates before she'd even graduated law school. And now, at 29, she's done it. The youngest in the firm's history. More applause. Victoria stood, kissed her father's cheek, took the microphone. She was luminous. She was everything I'd fallen in love with. Brilliant and driven and beautiful in a way that made you feel lucky just to be in the same room. She spoke about mentors and opportunities and hard work. She thanked her parents for their support. She thanked her colleagues for their faith in her. She did not mention me. Not once. Not when she talked about the long nights studying for the bar exam. Not when she described the sacrifices she'd made to build her career. Not when she listed the people who'd believed in her when she doubted herself. I'd held her through every one of those moments. I'd brought her coffee at 2 a.m. when she was reviewing case files. I'd listened to her practice opening statements in our bathroom mirror. I'd taken extra shifts to cover our expenses when she was working unpaid internships. I'd believed in her so completely that I'd forgotten to check if she believed in us. She finished her speech to standing ovation. The applause was thunder. It was celebration. It was 370 people acknowledging that Victoria Ashworth, she'd never taken my last name, and I'd told myself it was fine, it was her choice, it didn't mean anything, was exceptional. And I was invisible. I looked down at my hand, at my wedding ring, simple gold band, nothing fancy. I'd chosen it because Victoria had said she liked understated elegance. We'd bought matching ones, stood in that little jewelry shop in the Arts District, held hands across the counter while the jeweler sized them. Forever, she'd said. I'd believed her. The applause was fading. Dinner was resuming. Conversations bubbling back up like water returning after a stone is thrown. Victoria was sitting back down, flushed and happy, her mother kissing her cheek, her father raising a toast. I walked to the platform. Every step was clear. Every step was a decision. This is what calm looks like from the outside. Purposeful, measured, controlled. This is what drowning looks like when you finally decide to stop fighting and just let yourself sink. I climbed the 3 steps to the elevated table. 16 faces turned toward me. Victoria's smile froze. "Marcus," she said quietly, "what are you?" I stood in front of her place, setting the plate with its beautiful food, the crystal glass with its expensive wine, the ivory name card with its perfect calligraphy. Victoria Ashworth. I looked at her, she looked back, and I saw it finally, what I'd been refusing to see for how long now? Months? Years? The way you look at someone you've outgrown, someone you've moved past but haven't quite figured out how to leave behind, someone who's useful but not essential, present but not important, someone wearing a badge that says housekeeper. I took off my wedding ring. The room didn't go silent immediately. It took a few seconds for people to notice, for conversations to stutter and stop, for 370 people to realize something was happening that wasn't part of the evening's carefully planned program. I set the ring down on Victoria's plate, right in the center, gold against white porcelain. "I'm done," I said. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly enough for the people at the table to hear, for Victoria to hear, for her mother and father, and all 16 members of the family who hadn't saved me a chair. Victoria stared at the ring. "Marcus, you're embarrassing yourself. We can talk about this later. There's nothing to talk about." I took off the name badge, peeled it slowly from my suit, the adhesive making a soft sound like skin separating from a bandage. I set it down next to the ring. Housekeeper. I built this room, I said. Still calm, still clear. The lights you're eating under, the power that's running this entire event, the backup systems that keep the champagne cold, and the music playing. I built it all. Mrs. Ashworth stood. Marcus, this is inappropriate. I built our life too, Victoria. The house, the security, the comfort that let you work 90-hour weeks without worrying about anything breaking down. I built it while you built your career. And I never asked for thanks. I never asked for credit. I just asked to be your husband. You are my husband, Victoria said, but her voice was thin now, uncertain. No. I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. I'm your housekeeper. I walked off the platform, walked through the ballroom. 370 people watched me go. Some looked confused. Some looked uncomfortable. A few, I saw it in their faces, looked like they understood exactly what had just happened, even if they'd never acknowledge it out loud. I reached the door. Behind me, I heard Victoria's voice, pitched high and brittle. He's just tired. The stress of tonight, you know how it is. I kept walking. The foyer was empty now. Everyone inside for the main event. The chandeliers hummed their constant frequency above me. The marble echoed my footsteps. I walked out the front doors, past the valets, into the parking lot where my truck waited among the Mercedes and Teslas and Range Rovers. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time. My phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. Where did you go? This is humiliating. Not, I'm sorry. Not, let's talk. Not, I didn't mean to hurt you. This is humiliating. For her. I looked at my left hand, at the pale band of skin where my wedding ring had been. The mark would fade, eventually. Everything fades if you give it enough time. I started the engine. They thought they'd put me in my place tonight. Thought they'd shown me where I belonged in their world, in their hierarchy, in their carefully arranged social order. They had no idea what I was about to do. The highway was empty at this hour. Just me and the broken white lines disappearing under my headlights. Each one a tiny decision to keep moving forward. I drove without the radio, without anything but the sound of the engine and my own breathing, which was surprisingly steady for a man whose marriage had just ended in front of 370 witnesses. My phone kept buzzing. I'd turned off the sound, but I could feel it vibrating in my jacket pocket, insistent and angry, like a wasp trapped against glass. I didn't look. I knew what the messages would say. I'd learned Victoria's language over 7 years. Knew how she spoke when things didn't go according to plan. The truck knew the way home without me thinking about it. Left at Johnson Street, right on Maple, straight through the intersection where we'd gotten T-boned 3 years ago. Minor accident, everyone fine, but Victoria had been furious at the inconvenience. I'd handled the insurance, the repairs, the rental car arrangements. She'd been in depositions all week. Couldn't deal with it. I'd told her not to worry. I told her not to worry about a lot of things. The house appeared like a memory I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. 3-bedroom colonial, blue shutters, front porch I'd rebuilt by hand over one long summer. The neighborhood was nice. Not Ashworth nice, but solid. Middle class nice. The kind of nice where people mowed their lawns and said hello and didn't need name badges to tell them who belonged. I sat in the driveway for a while, engine off, looking at the dark windows. We'd bought this place 5 years ago. Victoria had wanted something bigger, something in her parents' neighborhood where the lots were measured in acres and the mailboxes had family crests. But the math hadn't worked. Not on my salary and her junior associate income. It's temporary, she'd said, walking through the rooms with barely concealed disappointment. Just until I make partner. Then we'll upgrade. I'd loved it immediately. Loved the oak floors that needed refinishing. Loved the outdated kitchen that gave me an excuse to learn cabinetry. Loved the wiring that was a disaster, but fixable. Everything fixable if you had the right tools and enough patience. I'd made this house perfect for her. Smart home system. Heated bathroom floors. A home office with custom built-ins and lighting that adjusted automatically based on time of day. I'd programmed it to her schedule. Bright and energizing in the morning, soft and warm in the evening. I'd even installed speakers in the walls so she could listen to music while she worked, the sound following her from room to room. She'd said thank you. Once. When I'd first shown her the completed office. Then she'd asked if I could make the lights a little less blue in the morning because it was giving her headaches. I'd adjusted them that same day. The phone stopped buzzing. 30 seconds of silence. Then it started again. I pulled it out. Finally. 17 missed calls. 23 text messages. All Victoria. I scrolled through them without reading carefully. They followed a pattern I recognized. Anger first, then rationalization, then bargaining, then back to anger. You made a scene. Everyone is asking questions. Mother is mortified. This is ridiculous. Come back. We need to talk about your behavior. You're being childish. Fine. Take your time. But this conversation isn't over. The last message was from 3 minutes ago. I'm getting an Uber home. We're going to discuss this like adults. I looked at the dark house, thought about being inside it when she arrived, thought about the conversation she'd planned, the one where she explained why I was wrong and why I'd misunderstood, and why, really, if I thought about it rationally, the name badge was just a joke and the missing chair was just an oversight, and couldn't I see how I'd ruined her special night? I started the engine. I drove to the 24-hour diner on Route 7, the one with the cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been made during the Carter administration. Marlene was working the night shift. She was always working the night shift, had been for as long as I've been coming here. She looked up when I walked in, took in my Tom Ford suit and missing wedding ring, and poured coffee without asking. Rough night, sugar. You could say that. She left the pot on the table and disappeared into the kitchen. That was Marlene's gift, knowing when someone needed silence more than conversation. I sat in a booth by the window and opened my phone, ignored Victoria's messages, opened my email instead. The work account was full of the usual: project updates, permit requests, client inquiries. I'd been putting in 60-hour weeks for the past 3 months, taking every job I could, building up the savings account Victoria didn't know about. The one I'd opened 2 years ago when I started noticing things. Little things, mostly. The way she'd stopped talking when I entered a room. The way her mother's criticism of me had gotten sharper and more frequent. And Victoria had stopped defending me. The way she'd started saying I instead of we when she talked about the future. When I buy a vacation house. Not when we buy. After I make partner, not after we celebrate. My career needs this, not our life needs this. Little cracks in the foundation, easy to ignore individually. But I'm an electrician. I'm trained to see patterns, to notice when small failures indicate systemic problems. So I'd started documenting, not because I thought I'd need it, just because documentation is what you do when something feels wrong, but you can't articulate why. When you need to see the evidence laid out clearly before you can admit what it's showing you. I opened the folder on my phone labeled Household Expenses. Victoria thought it was boring financial tracking. She'd never looked at it closely. Inside were screenshots, dates and times, conversations and emails. A timeline of exactly how I'd gone from my husband to the housekeeper. The first screenshot was from 18 months ago. A text exchange between Victoria and her mother. Eleanor. How was the dinner with the Hendersons? Victoria. Good. They loved the house. Asked who our designer was. I said I'd send info. Eleanor. And Marcus? Victoria. What about him? Eleanor. Did he make a good impression? Victoria. He was fine. Talked about electrical work. You know how he is. Eleanor. Darling, you're going to need to address this eventually. Victoria. Address what? Eleanor. The optics. You're moving in circles where your husband needs to be more than an electrician. Victoria. He's a master electrician, Mom. He owns his own business. Eleanor. I'm sure he's very good at what he does, but when you make partner, people will expect a certain presentation. Victoria's response had taken 3 minutes. I know, not, that's unfair. Not, I love him for who he is. Not, my career doesn't change what matters. Just, I know. I took a sip of coffee. It was terrible. I drank it anyway. The next screenshot was from a year ago. Victoria's calendar, which she'd asked me to help her organize. We'd shared access so I could add appointments for home repairs, dinner reservations, date nights. Things we'd stopped doing, I realize now. Around the same time, I got access to her schedule. I'd found an entry from October. Lunch with her mother and someone named Adriana Cross, a name I didn't recognize but found easily enough with a quick search. Life coach, executive consultant. Specializing in professional image management and strategic social positioning. Below the lunch appointment was a note. Discuss M situation. Options? M situation. I'd stared at that for 20 minutes when I first found it. Told myself it meant something else. Marketing situation. Management situation. Anything but Marcus situation. But I'd kept looking. Kept collecting. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. There was the email from 8 months ago, Victoria to her father's lawyer. I need to understand the prenup we signed. Specifically the provisions if employment circumstances change significantly for either party. There was the text exchange from 6 months ago. Victoria to her college roommate. Everything with M is fine. I just need to think strategically about the next few years. There was the phone call I'd overheard 4 months ago. Victoria in her office late at night, thinking I was asleep. I'm not saying I made a mistake. I'm saying circumstances have changed. I'm saying I need to consider what's best for my career trajectory. I'm saying yes, Mother. I understand that partnership means certain expectations about my personal life. 300 pieces of evidence, screenshots and recordings and documents saved in a cloud folder Victoria didn't know existed. Each one a small thing. A dismissive comment. A strategic omission. A plan being made around me instead of with me. The kind of evidence you collect when you're an electrician who spent 15 years learning to document everything. Because when something goes wrong, people always ask, what proof do you have? Marlene returned with pie. Cherry. Still warm. On the house, she said. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She slid into the booth across from me, which she never did. You want to talk about it? Not really. Good. Most people who want to talk don't need to. The ones who don't want to usually should. She folded her hands on the table. But I'm not going to push. I'm just going to tell you something my grandmother told me when my first husband turned out to be exactly the bastard everyone warned me he was. I waited. She said, Marlene, honey, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And when they show you what they think of you, believe that too. But most importantly, when you finally see the truth, Don't waste time being surprised. Just decide what you're going to do about it. She stood up, patted my shoulder, and went back to the counter. I ate the pie slowly. Thought about truth. Thought about what I'd seen tonight and what I'd been seeing for months, years maybe. But I'd explained away because I loved Victoria, and you don't abandon people you love just because things get hard. Except she hadn't loved me back. Not the same way. Maybe not at all. My phone buzzed. Victoria, I'm home. Where are you? I typed. Out. 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. Victoria, we need to talk. Me. Not tonight. Victoria, you embarrassed me in front of everyone who matters to my career. I stared at that message. Read it 3 times. Everyone who matters. Not everyone I care about. Not everyone we know. Not our friends and family. Everyone who matters to my career. I took a screenshot, added it to the folder. Number 301. Me. I'm filing for divorce. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 4 times. Then my phone rang. I didn't answer. It rang again. Again. On the 4th call, I turned it off completely. Marlene brought more coffee. You good? Getting there. She nodded and left me alone. I sat in that booth until sunrise, watching the sky change from black to navy to the kind of blue that means morning is coming, whether you're ready or not. I made lists. I made plans. I thought about every conversation, every interaction, every moment over the past 7 years that I'd misinterpreted as love when it was actually convenience. The thing about being an electrician is you learn to think in systems. You learn that every component affects every other component. You learn that when something fails, it's rarely just one broken part. It's a cascade. A series of small failures that compound until the whole structure comes down. My marriage had been failing for a long time. I'd just been too busy maintaining it to notice. But I noticed now, and I knew exactly what to do about it. When I finally left the diner, the sun was fully up, and Route 7 was filling with morning commuters. People heading to work, people starting their days, people who had no idea that somewhere in this ordinary Tuesday morning, a man in a $2,000 suit had decided to dismantle his entire life with the same careful precision he used to wire buildings. I drove to my office, a small space above a hardware store downtown, nothing fancy but mine. I hadn't been there in 3 days, too busy with the luxury job sites that paid premium rates, too busy earning money for a life Victoria was planning to upgrade past me. My business partner James was already there, going over blueprints for a commercial renovation. He looked up when I walked in. You look like shit, he said. Feel worse. The party was that bad? I had told him about it last week, mentioned it casually because he'd asked why I was wearing a suit to work. Victoria's promotion thing. Her parents are throwing a big celebration. Worse than bad, I said now. But also clarifying. James had known me for 12 years, worked with me since I started my own business 7 years ago. He was the closest thing I had to a best friend, though we'd never called it that, just showed up for each other when it mattered. He put down the blueprints. Clarifying how. Turns out I've been married to someone who thinks I'm the help. Ah, James nodded slowly. Yeah, I've been waiting for you to figure that out. I stared at him. You knew? Marcus, everyone knew. We just couldn't tell you because people don't hear that kind of thing until they're ready. He pulled out a chair. Sit down. Tell me what happened. So I did. Told him about the badge and the missing chair and the ring I'd left on Victoria's plate. Told him about the folder on my phone and the 18 months of evidence I'd been collecting without admitting to myself why. James listened without interrupting. When I finished, He was quiet for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" he finally asked. "File for divorce. Today. I already have a lawyer." "You already have a lawyer?" "I called him from the parking lot of the diner. It's 7 a.m. He owes me a favor. I rewired his house last year, caught a fire hazard that would have burned the place down. Told him to call any time." I pulled out my phone, turned it back on. 47 missed calls, 62 messages. Turns out any time includes 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. "Okay." James leaned back. "So you file for divorce. Then what?" "Then I take everything I've built, the business, the reputation, the connections, and I show her exactly what she gave up when she decided I wasn't good enough for her world." "Revenge?" "Justice," I corrected. "There's a difference. Revenge is destruction. Justice is truth." "And you have truth?" I showed him the folder, showed him 300 screenshots and recordings, showed him the timeline I'd built, the pattern I'd documented, the evidence that would prove in any court, to any judge, exactly what kind of marriage I'd been living in. James whistled low. "You've been planning this?" "No. I've been surviving it. The planning started about 6 hours ago." I closed the phone. "Victoria's going to fight. Her parents are going to fight. They have money and lawyers and connections I can't match. But they think I'm just an electrician. Someone who fixes their lights and keeps their systems running and doesn't understand how power really works." I looked at James. "They're wrong. I believe you. I need your help. Whatever you need. Cover for me. The business, the jobs, everything. For the next month, maybe 2. I need time to handle this correctly." "Done?" No hesitation. That was James. "Anything else?" "Yeah." I stood up, stretched muscles that were stiff from sitting all night. "I need you to pull every file we have on work we've done for the Ashworth family and their associates. Every project, every invoice, every site visit." "Why?" "Because Victoria's father built an empire on real estate. And every building in his empire needed electrical work. And most of it was substandard before we came in and fixed it." I smiled, and it felt strange on my face. Code violations, safety hazards, shortcuts that should have never passed inspection, but did because someone paid someone else to look the other way. James started to grin. "You documented everything." "I always document everything." "They're going to underestimate you." "I'm counting on it." My phone rang. "Victoria." I sent it to voicemail. James picked up the blueprints again. "Go. Handle your business. I've got things here." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll nail these people to the wall." "I promise." I walked out into the morning. The air was cold and clean and felt like the first breath after being underwater too long. My truck was waiting. My lawyer was waiting. My entire carefully rebuilt future was waiting. Victoria thought last night was humiliating. She had no idea what humiliation actually looked like. But she was about to learn. David Chen's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone on Lexington Street. The kind of place that looked modest from the outside but whispered competence once you stepped through the door. Hardwood floors. Built-in bookshelves filled with legal volumes that had actually been read, a coffee maker that smelled like it had been running since dawn. David met me in the lobby himself. No receptionist to act as buffer. He was 53, salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'd rewired his entire house 18 months ago, found knob and tube wiring from the 1940s that was one spark away from catastrophe. His wife had been 8 months pregnant. His daughter was sleeping in a room with walls full of fire waiting to happen. I told you to call any time, he had said when I explained what I'd found, showed him the photos, mapped out the scope of work needed. You might have just saved my family's lives. I'd done the job at cost, refused his attempts to pay full price. Babies are expensive, I'd said. Consider it a gift. He had shaken my hand. I owe you one. A big one. I was here to collect. Marcus. He gripped my shoulder, guided me toward his office. I made coffee. You look like you need it. I've had about 6 cups already, but yeah, I need it. His office was exactly what you'd expect. Organized chaos. Case files stacked precisely. Yellow legal pads covered in notes. A whiteboard on one wall with a timeline drawn in different colored markers. He gestured me toward a leather chair that had shaped itself to comfort through decades of anxious clients. Tell me everything, he said. So I did. Showed him the name badge. I'd kept it, folded carefully in my jacket pocket like evidence. Told him about the missing chair, the ring, the walkout. Showed him the folder on my phone with its 300 pieces of documented evidence. David scrolled through it without speaking. 5 minutes. 10. His expression didn't change, but I could see his mind working, cataloging, organizing, building a case from the fragments I'd collected. How long have you been documenting? He finally asked. 18 months intentionally, but I have emails and texts going back 5 years. I never deleted anything. Why? I thought about that. I'm an electrician. We document everything because when something fails, everyone asks for proof. I guess I've been preparing for failure longer than I wanted to admit. David set down the phone. Marcus, I'm going to be very direct with you. What you have here is extraordinary. Most divorce cases come down to he said, she said. Memory against memory. But this, he gestured at the phone, this is a timeline, a narrative, proof of systematic emotional abuse and strategic planning for marital exit. Can we use it? Oh, we're definitely using it. But first, I need to understand what you want out of this divorce. Everything I'm entitled to. Be specific. I'd thought about this all night. Between cups of bad diner coffee and watching the sunrise, I'd made lists. Calculations. Plans. The house, I said. I renovated it. Every room. I can document exactly how much I increased its value, labor, and materials. I want it. David made notes. What else? Half of her 401k and retirement accounts. We've been married 7 years. That's 7 years of contribution made while I was taking lower paying jobs so I could handle more of the home responsibilities while she built her career. Reasonable. Continue. I want documentation of every expense I covered that should have been joint. Mortgage payments I made alone when she said she was between bonuses. Grocery bills. Utilities. Home repairs. I kept receipts. Of course you did. David was writing faster now. What about alimony? I hesitated. This was the part that felt like revenge instead of justice. But Marlene's grandmother's words echoed. Decide what you're going to do about it. I want her to understand what I contributed, I said carefully. I want a settlement that reflects 7 years of me subsidizing her career climb while being told I wasn't good enough for her world. Is that alimony? Is that damages? I don't know the legal terms. I just know I deserve compensation for being treated like the help in my own marriage. David looked at me over his glasses. What you're describing is a combination of equitable distribution, potential spousal support, and possibly, if we can prove it, emotional distress. New York is a no-fault divorce state, but that doesn't mean abuse of any kind doesn't factor into settlements. Can we prove it? He tapped my phone. You already did. This folder is a record of systematic diminishment. Her mother's texts alone show a pattern of encouraging Victoria to see you as a liability to her career. Victoria's own messages show she was planning for your eventual removal from her life while still benefiting from your financial and emotional support. So we have a case. Marcus, we have a damn strong case. But I need you to understand something. He leaned forward. The Ashworths have money. Real money. They're going to bring in attorneys from firms that bill 4 figures an hour. They're going to try to bury us in paperwork and motions and delays. They're going to make this expensive and exhausting and miserable. I know. Do you? Because this isn't going to be quick. This isn't going to be clean. They're going to attack your character. They're going to paint you as someone who married above his station and is now trying to cash out. They're going to make you look greedy and opportunistic, and they're going to make me look exactly how they already see me, I interrupted, like someone who doesn't belong, someone who should be grateful for whatever scraps they throw, someone who should know his place. David nodded slowly. Yes. Good. Let them. Because every time they do, they prove my case. They prove that Victoria and her family never saw me as an equal, never saw our marriage as a partnership. And that's what we're really arguing, isn't it? That I was never a husband to them, just an employee they forgot to pay. Exactly. David smiled, and it wasn't kind. It was the smile of a man who'd just realized his client understood the game. Okay, let's file. Today. I'll draft the papers, and we'll submit by end of business. Which means Victoria gets served probably tomorrow or Thursday. She's going to lose her mind. Undoubtedly. Which is why I need you to do something difficult. What? Don't go home. Not yet. Not until she's been served and we've established your position. Stay somewhere else. With a friend? A hotel? I don't care. But don't put yourself in a situation where she can claim you were threatening or aggressive or anything that muddles our narrative. I thought about the house, about my tools in the garage, and my clothes in the closet, and 7 years of life accumulated in rooms I'd rebuilt with my own hands. I'll stay with James, I said. Your business partner? Yeah, he's got a spare room. He's covering the business while I handle this. Good. That's good. David made more notes. One more thing. I need you to prepare yourself for what comes after filing. After? Victoria's going to call, text, email. She's going to want to meet. She's going to say you're being irrational, that you're throwing away your marriage over nothing, that if you just come home, you can work this out. She's going to cry. She's going to apologize. She's going to promise things will be different. I thought about the name badge in my pocket. About 17 missed calls and 62 messages. About standing in front of 370 people, wearing a label that said I was less than human. I won't fall for it. People always say that, and then they do. David's voice was gentle now, not lawyer sharp, but genuinely kind. Marcus, you loved her. Maybe you still do. That doesn't disappear just because you've been hurt. So when she calls, and she will, remember why you're here. Remember that badge. Remember that missing chair. Remember that she let you walk out of your marriage in front of everyone who matters to her career. And her biggest concern was the embarrassment. I'll remember. Good. He stood, extended his hand. I'll call you when the papers are ready to sign, probably around 3. Can you come back? I'll be here. We shook hands. His grip was firm. Certain. The grip of someone who knew how to fight and win. I left the brownstone feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the passive kind you carry when you're just trying to get through the day. The active kind. The kind that makes you dangerous because you're not afraid of losing anymore. You've already lost everything that mattered, and now you're just claiming what's yours. My phone had been buzzing constantly. I'd been ignoring it. Now, standing on Lexington Street with morning sun warming my face, I finally looked. 73 missed calls. Victoria, her mother, her father, numbers I didn't recognize. One voicemail from Victoria, left at 6:47 a.m. Marcus, I don't know where you are, but this is insane. You walked out of the most important night of my career because of what? A seating arrangement? A joke badge? You're being incredibly childish, and honestly, I'm disappointed. I thought you were more mature than this. Call me back. We need to discuss your behavior like adults. Your behavior. Not our issues. Not what went wrong. Not how I hurt you. Your behavior. I saved the voicemail. Screenshot number 302. There was a text from her father, sent at 7:15 a.m. Marcus, this is Charles Ashworth. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this little stunt last night was unacceptable. You embarrassed my daughter and my family. I suggest you apologize immediately, and we can all move forward from this unfortunate incident. Little stunt. Unfortunate incident. Screenshot 303. Her mother had sent an email at 8:02 a.m. Marcus, I'm writing because clearly something has upset you, though I can't imagine what. Last night was perfect until you decided to make it about yourself. Victoria has worked incredibly hard for this partnership, and you diminished her achievement with your dramatic exit. I'm sure you're feeling emotional. Men often struggle with their wives' success. But you need to pull yourself together. Come by the house this evening. We'll have a calm discussion about how you can properly support Victoria's career moving forward. Men often struggle with their wives' success. How you can properly support Victoria's career. Screenshot 304. I stood there reading these messages, feeling something cold and clear settle in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Anger is hot and messy and clouds judgment. This was more like the moment when you find the source of a short circuit, trace the failed connection back to its origin, and finally understand exactly what needs to be fixed. They genuinely didn't understand what they'd done wrong. They thought last night was about my ego, my insecurity, my inability to handle Victoria's success. They had no idea it was about 7 years of being erased, 7 years of being useful but not valued, 7 years of building a life with someone who was simultaneously planning to outgrow me. I called James. Tell me you filed, he answered. Filing this afternoon. I need that favor. Spare room's yours. How long? Could be weeks. Could be months. I've got Netflix and a fully stocked bar. We'll manage. A pause. You okay? I'm something. Not sure okay is the word. Fair enough. Listen, I pulled those files you asked about. The Ashworth properties. Marcus, there's some seriously problematic stuff in here. How problematic? Remember the Riverside complex? The one we were hired to bring up to code after their original electrical contractor cut corners? Yeah, that was 3 years ago. Massive job. Right. Well, I found the original inspection reports. The ones that somehow passed despite failing to meet basic safety standards. And I found the permits. And guess whose signature is on the approval documents? I waited. Lawrence Brennan, city electrical inspector, also happens to be Charles Ashworth's former college roommate. I felt that cold clarity intensify. Can we prove a connection? I've got photographs from Ashworth's 60th birthday party. Brennan is front and center. They golf together. Their families vacation together. And somehow, every property Ashworth develops passes electrical inspection on the first try, even when the work is substandard. That's corruption. That's exactly what it is. Question is, what are you going to do with this information? I thought about it. About justice versus revenge. About truth versus destruction. Nothing yet, I said, but I'm going to keep it in my back pocket in case they decide to make this uglier than it needs to be. They're going to make it ugly, Marcus. People like that always do. Then I'll be ready. We hung up. I walked to my truck, drove to a storage facility on the outskirts of town. I'd rented a unit 2 months ago. One more thing I'd done without really admitting to myself why. Inside was everything that mattered to me, but not to Victoria. My father's tools, passed down when he died 5 years ago. Photo albums from before the marriage, when I'd had friends I saw regularly and hobbies I made time for. Tax documents and financial records I'd kept separately because Victoria had insisted on handling our joint finances. And something about that had made me uncomfortable enough to maintain parallel records. I loaded everything into the truck, emptied the unit. When I was done, there was nothing left that they could hold hostage, nothing they could use as leverage, nothing they could take that I wasn't prepared to lose. My phone rang. Victoria. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Her father, voicemail. Then her mother, voicemail. Then a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Mr. Reeves? A woman's voice. Professional? Cool. Speaking. This is Patricia Hollis from Whitmore and Associates. I'm calling on behalf of Victoria Ashworth regarding the incident last night. There was no incident. I left a party. Mr. Reeves, I understand you're upset, but Victoria would like to resolve this matter privately and amicably. She's asked me to arrange a meeting between the two of you. Ms. Hollis, are you Victoria's lawyer or her colleague? A pause. I'm a partner at her firm, but I'm calling as a friend. Then tell your friend she'll be hearing from my attorney by end of business today. Any further communication should go through legal counsel. Mr. Reeves, surely that's not necessary. It's very necessary. Have a good day, Ms. Hollis. I hung up. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear. From the adrenaline of finally standing up and saying no. Of refusing to be managed and handled and smoothed over like a problem to be solved. The phone rang again. David Chin this time. Papers are ready, he said. Can you come sign now instead of 3? We've got a courier who can serve Victoria at her office this afternoon if we move fast. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I drove back to the brownstone, signed my name on documents that would officially end my marriage, watched David seal them in an envelope, hand them to a courier who nodded once and disappeared into the Tuesday afternoon traffic. It's done, David said. She'll be served within the next 2 hours. And then? Then we wait for her response. She has 30 days to file her counter petition, but she'll probably move faster, especially once she sees what we're asking for. He handed me a copy of the filing. Read it tonight. Familiarize yourself with everything we're claiming, because she's going to call you, and she's going to tell you we're being unreasonable, and you need to remember that every single item on this list is justified. I looked at the document. At the numbers and legal language that translated 7 years of my life into terms a court could understand. At the list of assets and contributions and damages that proved I'd been more than the help. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. The real fight starts when she realizes you're serious. I am serious. I know you are. That's why we're going to win. I left with the documents in hand and drove to James's house. He met me at the door with a beer and a grim smile. Welcome to your new bachelor pad, he said. The spare room's made up. Wi-Fi password is on the counter. And Marcus? Yeah? I'm proud of you. I felt something catch in my throat, swallowed it down. Thanks. Now, come inside and tell me everything. Because I've been watching the Ashworth real estate empire all morning, and I found some very interesting things about their financial structure that I think you're going to want to hear. I followed him inside. The house smelled like coffee and takeout, and the kind of comfortable mess that comes from actually living instead of just maintaining appearances. My phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. We need to talk now. I turned off the phone completely. Let her wait. Let her wonder. Let her feel what it's like when someone just disappears without explanation or apology. She'd taught me that lesson well enough. Now it was time for her final exam. Victoria was served at 3:47 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. I know the exact time because David called me the moment his courier confirmed delivery. She'd been in a meeting, senior partners only, according to the receptionist who had taken the envelope and walked it back to the conference room herself. Professional service, David said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Maximum impact. I imagined it. Victoria mid-presentation, probably discussing strategy or client acquisition or whatever partners discuss behind closed doors. The interruption. The envelope. Her confusion turning to understanding, turning to something I couldn't quite name, but hoped was close to what I'd felt wearing a badge that said housekeeper. My phone stayed off for 2 hours after that. James and I sat in his living room, him showing me the financial records he'd compiled on Ashworth properties, me trying to focus on numbers and shell companies and questionable accounting practices while wondering what was happening across town. You okay? James asked around hour 3. Ask me tomorrow. Fair enough. He pulled up another document on his laptop. Look at this. The Riverside complex we fixed, the one with the safety violations, it's owned by something called Clearwater Holdings LLC. Okay? Clearwater Holdings is owned by another LLC, which is owned by another LLC. It shells all the way down, Marcus. But if you trace it far enough, and I did, because I had nothing better to do today, it all leads back to Charles Ashworth. That's not illegal? No. But it's interesting when you consider that Clearwater Holdings has filed insurance claims for electrical fires 3 times in the past 10 years. Major claims. 6 figures each. And every single time, the properties have been signed off by Lawrence Brennan despite substandard electrical work. I looked at him. They're committing insurance fraud. I'm not a lawyer. I can't say that definitively. But if I were a lawyer, and if I were investigating why a property management company keeps having suspicious electrical fires in buildings that somehow passed inspection despite failing to meet code, he let the sentence hang. You'd find a pattern. I'd find a very lucrative pattern. James closed the laptop. Question is, what do you want to do with this information? Hold on to it, for now. If they play fair, we never mention it. If they don't, I shrugged. Then we give them a reason to reconsider their strategy. That's cold, Marcus. They taught me how to be cold. I'm just a good student. At 6:15 p.m., I turned my phone back on. It exploded. 93 missed calls, 147 text messages, 12 voicemails. A digital avalanche of panic and rage and disbelief. I scrolled through the messages chronologically, watching the evolution of Victoria's response in real time. 3:52 p.m., Victoria. What the fuck did you just do? 3:53 p.m., Victoria. Call me now. 3:55 p.m., Victoria. I was just served divorce papers in the middle of a meeting. 3:56 p.m., Victoria. In front of my partners. Marcus. My partners. 4:01 p.m., Victoria. You're really doing this? You're actually doing this over a stupid party? 4:03 p.m., Victoria. This is insane. You're being insane. 4:15 p.m., Victoria. My mother is on her way to your office. We need to talk. All of us. 4:23 p.m. Victoria. Where are you? Your business partner says you're unavailable. What does that mean? 4:31 p.m. Victoria. Fine. Don't answer. But you need to understand what you're doing. You're throwing away our marriage. Our life together over nothing. Then there was a gap. 90 minutes of silence. I imagined her with her parents, with their lawyers, everyone telling her this was fixable, manageable, just another problem to solve with the right strategy. The messages resumed at 6:02 p.m., and the tone had shifted. 6:02 p.m., Victoria. Marcus, I've spoken with my attorney. This filing is ridiculous. You're asking for things you're not entitled to. The house that my parents helped us buy. Money that I earned. This is going to get ugly if you don't withdraw this. 6:08 p.m. Victoria. I'm trying to be reasonable, but if you push this, I will fight back. You don't want to know what I'm capable of when someone tries to take advantage of me. 6:12 p.m. Victoria. Last chance. Come home. We'll talk to a mediator. We can handle this like adults instead of dragging it through court. I took screenshots of everything, added them to the folder. Then I called David. I assume you've seen the messages, I said. Oh, I've seen them. I've also received a very aggressive call from Richard Whitmore himself, founding partner of Victoria's firm, net worth somewhere north of $50 million. He wanted to inform me that my client is making a serious mistake and should reconsider before this gets expensive. What did you tell him? I told him that threats don't work on me. His client was served properly and legally, and any further communication should go through formal legal channels. A pause. He didn't like that. Good. Marcus, you should know. They're going to come at you hard. They've already started building a narrative. That you're bitter about Victoria's success. That you married above your station and now you're trying to cash out. That you're emotionally unstable. Let them. I'm serious. They're going to make you look bad. They're going to dig up everything. Old relationships, financial history, anything they can use to paint you as the villain in this story. David, I've spent 18 months documenting how they see me, how they've always seen me. Every text, every email, every conversation proves I was never an equal in this marriage. So let them call me bitter. Let them say I'm cashing out. Because every time they do, they prove my case. You're remarkably calm about this. I'm an electrician. We don't panic when the circuit breaks. We identify the problem and fix it. I looked at my phone, at Victoria's messages threatening to fight back. They're the problem. The divorce is the fix. All right. Then here's what happens next. They have 30 days to respond to our filing, but they'll move faster. Probably by end of week. They'll file a counter petition asking for the house, arguing that their family's financial contribution means they have more claim to it. They'll fight the spousal support, say you're perfectly capable of supporting yourself. They'll try to minimize the value of your contributions to the marriage. And we counter with every receipt you kept, every bank statement showing you paid the mortgage alone for months at a time, every invoice for home improvements you did yourself, valued at contractor rates, every text message where her mother calls you the help, every email where Victoria discusses the M situation like you're a problem to be managed. David's voice was sharp now, attorney confident. They think this is about money. It's not. It's about respect. It's about proving you were a partner, not an employee. And that's a case we can win. How long? If they're reasonable, 6 months. If they fight everything, could be a year, maybe more. Depends how much money they want to spend making you miserable. They have a lot of money, then it could be a long year. But Marcus, we're prepared for that. You've done the work. You've built the case. Now we just have to see it through. We hung up. I sat in James's spare room. Generic furniture, beige walls, the kind of anonymous space that could belong to anyone, and felt the weight of what I'd started. A year. Maybe more. A year of fighting and filing and watching my marriage get dissected in legal briefs and court proceedings. A year of being called bitter and opportunistic and emotionally unstable by people who'd smiled to my face while planning my exit from their lives. My phone rang. Victoria. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message this time, and her voice was different. Not angry, not threatening, hurt, vulnerable. The voice she used when she wanted something. Marcus, please. I know you're upset. I know last night it was bad. I see that now. Mother went too far with the badge thing, and I should have defended you. I should have made sure you had a seat. I'm sorry. I really am. But this, a shaky breath, this is too much. Divorce? We can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can work on communication. Just, please call me back. Please let's not throw away 7 years over one bad night. One bad night. As if it were an isolated incident. As if there weren't 304 pieces of evidence showing a pattern that stretched back years. I saved the voicemail, listened to it twice more, heard the tears in her voice, and felt nothing except exhaustion. The kind that comes from finally setting down something heavy you've been carrying too long. James knocked on the door. Food's here. Pizza. Hope that's okay. Perfect. We ate in the living room, some action movie playing on the TV that neither of us really watched. James's phone buzzed around 8 p.m. Huh, he said, looking at the screen. What? Email from Patricia Hollis, Victoria's colleague from this morning. He read silently. She's asking if I can convince you to reconsider the divorce. Says Victoria is devastated. Says you're making a mistake you'll regret. What are you going to tell her? Nothing. She emailed my work address, which means she doesn't have my personal number. Which means she's fishing, trying to find any way to reach you. He deleted the email. They're desperate. Good. You really feel nothing? No regret? No second thoughts? I thought about that. Examined my feelings like I'd examine a circuit diagram, trace each connection, identify what's functioning and what's failed. I feel relieved, I said finally. Is that terrible? It's honest. I feel like I've been holding my breath for years, trying to be enough, trying to fit into a space that was never designed for someone like me. And now I've stopped trying, and I can finally breathe again. James nodded. Then you're doing the right thing. Even if it takes a year? Even if they make it hell? Especially then. Because hell you're walking through is temporary. Hell you're living in is forever. Wednesday morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Reeves, this is Charles Ashworth. Victoria's father. Voice like gravel wrapped in silk. The voice of a man used to getting what he wants through sheer force of personality. Mr. Ashworth. I think we need to have a conversation. Man to man. No lawyers. No drama. Just two adults discussing a situation that's gotten out of hand. I have a lawyer for a reason. Marcus, I'm not your enemy. I know last night was unfortunate. Eleanor can be particular about her events, and sometimes that particularity crosses lines. But surely we can resolve this without nuclear options, like divorce filings. Nuclear options. I repeated the phrase, tasted the condescension in it. Mr. Ashworth, with respect, being served divorce papers in a meeting isn't a nuclear option. It's called consequences. Consequences. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Son, you don't understand what consequences look like. Not yet. But if you continue down this path, you're going to learn very quickly that there are levels to these things. Levels you're not prepared for. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You're an electrician. A good one, I'm told. You have a modest business, modest income, modest prospects. Victoria is a partner at one of the most prestigious law firms in the state. Do you really think a judge is going to side with you when you're asking for her house, her money, her assets? It's not her house. It's our house. I rebuilt it. And it's not her money. It's marital assets accumulated during 7 years of partnership. Partnership. He said it like the word tasted bad. Marcus, let me be very clear. You were never Victoria's partner. You were convenient. You were there when she needed domestic stability while she built her career. But now that career is established, and frankly, you're becoming a liability. I felt that cold clarity again. The kind that comes when someone finally says out loud what they've been thinking all along. Thank you for being honest, I said. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to save you from a very expensive, very public mistake. Withdraw the filing. We'll arrange a quiet separation. We'll even make sure you're compensated fairly for your time. But if you push this, if you try to take what Victoria has earned, we will destroy you. Financially, professionally, personally. We have resources you can't imagine, and we're prepared to use every single one of them. Mr. Ashworth, I appreciate the warning, but I'm not withdrawing anything. Victoria will respond to the filing through her attorney and will proceed through the legal system. Have a good day. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage, from the sheer audacity of a man who just called his daughter's husband a liability and a mistake, and then expected that husband to simply accept it and disappear quietly. I called David immediately, told him about the conversation. Did you record it? He asked. No. Damn. But write down everything he said while it's fresh. Verbatim if you can, especially the threats about destroying you. That's witness intimidation, Marcus. That's illegal. Will a judge care? If he's stupid enough to say something like that again where it can be documented? Absolutely. A pause. They're scared. That's what this is. They wouldn't be threatening you if they thought they could win cleanly. So what do I do? Nothing. You wait. You document everything. You don't engage with any of them unless it's through legal counsel. And Marcus, change your number. Today. Because this is only going to get worse before it gets better. He was right. By noon, Victoria's mother had left 3 voicemails, each one more hysterical than the last. By 2 p.m., Victoria's aunt, a woman I'd met exactly twice at family functions, called to tell me I was breaking her niece's heart and should be ashamed. By 6 p.m., someone from Victoria's firm had posted on social media about gold diggers who use marriage as a career strategy. And though they didn't name me, the timing was impossible to ignore. James saw the post. Want me to respond? No, let them talk. It's all evidence. Evidence of what? Of exactly who these people are when they don't get what they want. I took a screenshot of the post. Number 305. They're building up my case for me. They just don't know it yet. That evening, I did change my number. Texted the new one only to David and James. Felt the silence that followed like a physical weight lifting. Victoria couldn't call me anymore. Her parents couldn't threaten me. Their friends and colleagues couldn't harass me. I was unreachable, untouchable, finally free from the constant barrage of messages telling me I was wrong, I was unreasonable. I was ruining everything. I sat in James's spare room that night and opened the folder on my phone. 305 pieces of evidence. 305 moments of documentation that proved I wasn't crazy, wasn't bitter, wasn't making this up. I added one more, a summary document. Everything organized chronologically. Every text, every email, every conversation categorized and explained. The story of how a marriage ended, told in evidence and timestamps, and the kind of clarity that only comes when you finally stop lying to yourself about what you've been living through. David had asked what I wanted from this divorce. I wanted Victoria to understand what she'd lost. Not just the house, or the money, or the assets, but the person who'd loved her enough to rebuild an entire life around her dreams. The person who'd worked double shifts and taken lower paying jobs and rewired every outlet in their home because he wanted her to be happy. The person who'd worn a badge that said housekeeper and finally realized that some things can't be fixed. Some circuits are broken beyond repair, and sometimes the only solution is to shut down the system completely and walk away. I wanted her to understand that. But more than that, I wanted her to feel it, the way I'd felt it standing in that ballroom with no chair at the table, the way I'd felt it reading her mother's emails about the M situation, the way I'd felt it every single time someone treated me like I was lucky to be included in Victoria's life instead of recognizing that she'd been lucky to have me in hers. Justice, I'd told James. Not revenge. But standing in that spare room with 305 pieces of evidence organized into a narrative that couldn't be ignored or explained away or dismissed as emotional instability, I wondered if maybe they were the same thing after all. Truth told correctly doesn't just set you free. Sometimes it burns down everything that tried to cage you. And I was just getting started. Victoria's formal response arrived on Friday, exactly 3 days after she was served. David called me at 9 a.m., his voice tight with something between anger and admiration. "They move fast," he said. "I've got their counter petition. You should come to the office. You're going to want to see this in person." I was at the brownstone in 20 minutes. David had the documents spread across his conference table like a crime scene laid out for investigation. 43 pages of legal arguments, financial claims, and character assassination dressed up in Times New Roman font and proper legal formatting. "Coffee first," he said, pouring me a cup. "Trust me, you'll need it." I sat down, started reading. The first 10 pages were standard legal response, denying my claims, asserting Victoria's right to marital assets, requesting dismissal of certain demands. Professional. Expected. The kind of thing that happens in every divorce. Then came page 11, Respondent's Statement of Facts. What followed was a narrative I barely recognized. A story about a marriage where I was financially dependent on Victoria's income, where I had repeatedly failed to contribute meaningfully to household expenses, where I had demonstrated increasing resentment toward respondent's professional success, where I had exhibited controlling behavior and emotional instability. "This is fiction," I said. "Keep reading." Page 14 claimed I had isolated Victoria from her family, that I had objected repeatedly to her spending time with her parents, that I had created conflict at family gatherings through inappropriate behavior and inflammatory statements. Page 16 detailed the party. According to this version, I had been warmly welcomed and appropriately accommodated at the event. The name badge was described as a lighthearted element of the evening's theme that all guests participated in. My departure was characterized as an aggressive and theatrical display designed to humiliate respondent in front of her colleagues and professional associates. "They're claiming you abused her," David said quietly. "Emotionally, financially. That this divorce filing is another act of abuse, an attempt to punish her for her success. I looked up at him. None of this is true. I know, and we can prove it. But, Marcus, you need to understand what they're doing here. They're not just defending against your claims. They're trying to destroy your credibility before we even get to court. If a judge reads this and believes even part of it, your case becomes exponentially harder. Can they get away with this? Just lying? It's not technically lying. It's strategic interpretation. You did leave the party abruptly. You did remove your wedding ring in front of witnesses. They're taking facts and wrapping them in a narrative that makes you the villain. He turned to page 22. And they're asking for a restraining order. What? Temporary order of protection. They're claiming you've been harassing Victoria through phone calls and text messages, that you've made threats, that she fears for her safety. I pulled out my phone, the old one, the one I'd stopped using Wednesday, opened the message history. I haven't contacted her once since I left that party. Every call, every message, it's all been her. Calling me, texting me. I have evidence of 93 missed calls from her and her family in a single 6-hour period. I know, and we'll submit all of that. But in the meantime, if a judge grants this order, you're prohibited from contacting her, coming near her, going to the house, our house, the house I renovated. I know, but legally, until this is settled, it's marital property that she's currently occupying. And if there's a restraining order, you can't go there, can't retrieve your belongings, can't access anything without police escort and prior approval. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, crack. Like ice on a pond when the weight becomes too much. They're boxing me out completely. That's exactly what they're doing. It's a common strategy in contentious divorces. Lock down the assets, control the narrative, make the other party look dangerous. Then, when it comes time to negotiate, you're fighting from a position of weakness. David sat down across from me. But here's what they don't know. We have documentation of everything. Every text message showing she was the one calling you, every voicemail proving you haven't been harassing her, every email demonstrating that her family has been threatening and intimidating you, not the other way around. When's the hearing for the restraining order? Monday. Emergency hearing. We'll have about 20 minutes to present our case. He pulled out a legal pad. Between now and then, we need to compile everything. Every call log, every message, every piece of evidence that proves their allegations are false. Can you do that? I've been doing it for 18 months. Then let's get to work. We spent the weekend building our defense. David's office became our war room. Documents printed and organized, timelines created, evidence cross-referenced and categorized. His paralegal, a sharp woman named Rita, who'd been through her own brutal divorce, worked with us both days. Men always think they're the only ones who get screwed in these things, she said Saturday afternoon, highlighting key passages in text messages. They're not, but the difference is women are taught to document, to save everything, to prepare. She looked at me. You did that. You prepared. Most men don't. I'm an electrician. Documentation is survival. Well, it's about to save your ass. She handed me another stack of printed emails. Read these. Tell me which ones show her discussing handling you or managing your behavior. Those are gold. I read through emails between Victoria and her mother spanning 2 years. The language was careful, never explicitly cruel, but the subtext was clear. Victoria to Eleanor, April 2023. M is being difficult about the weekend at your place. Says he has a job he can't reschedule. I told him some things are more important than work. Eleanor to Victoria, April 2023. He needs to understand priorities, darling. Your career comes first. His little projects can wait. His little projects. I'd been installing emergency backup systems at a hospital that weekend, but to them, it was a little project that should wait for a family brunch. Victoria to Eleanor, September 2023. M made a comment at dinner last night about feeling like he's not part of the family. I don't know what he expects. He's just not interested in the same things we are. Eleanor to Victoria, September 2023. Some people never learn to move in certain circles. It's not your fault if he's uncomfortable. You've done your best. I remembered that dinner. September, her father's birthday. I tried to join a conversation about real estate development, mentioned some challenges I'd encountered with aging infrastructure in older buildings. Charles had smiled politely and changed the subject. I'd spent the rest of the evening silent, watching everyone talk around me like I was furniture. These are perfect, Rita said. They establish a pattern of exclusion and dismissiveness. They show that long before the party, her family viewed you as an outsider, someone to be tolerated, not included. Will a judge care? A good judge will, because this isn't just about the party or the divorce. It's about what constitutes emotional abuse in a marriage. And if we can prove that you were systematically diminished, excluded, and treated as less than by your wife and her family. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. David came back from a coffee run with sandwiches. Eat. Then we're going to practice for Monday. Practice what? Your testimony. If you're called to speak, and you probably will be, you need to be clear, calm, and specific. They're going to try to paint you as emotional and erratic. We need to show the judge who you really are. We ran through it a dozen times. David playing the Ashworth attorney, asking hostile questions designed to make me defensive. Rita timing my responses, coaching me to pause before answering, to speak slowly and clearly. Don't justify, she kept saying. Don't explain. Just state facts. When they ask why you left the party, you don't say because I was humiliated. You say, I was given a name badge identifying me as a housekeeper. There was no seat for me at the family table. I left. Facts. No emotion. But I was emotional. I am emotional. Of course you are. You're human. But in court, emotion reads as instability. Facts read as credibility. Save the emotion for when it matters. She pulled up another document. Now, when they ask about the phone calls, I didn't make any phone calls. Exactly. Say that. I did not contact my wife after leaving the event on November 19th. I have phone records showing 93 incoming calls from her and her family, which I did not answer. Simple, direct, provable. We practiced until my answers were automatic, until I could recite my timeline without hesitation, until every question they might ask had a response that was factual, documented, and unshakable. Sunday evening, David sent me home with a 3-ring binder containing copies of everything we'd be presenting. Read it tonight, memorize the timeline, get some sleep if you can. I drove back to James's house, found him in the garage working on his motorcycle, grease-stained and focused. How's it going? He asked without looking up. They're claiming I abused her. His hand stopped moving. He looked at me. What? I told him everything. The counter petition, the restraining order request, the narrative they'd constructed where I was controlling and dangerous and unstable. That's insane, James said. Anyone who knows you knows that's insane. The judge doesn't know me. Then make sure they do. He wiped his hands on a rag. Marcus, you're the most measured person I know. You don't snap. You don't lose control. You think through everything 3 times before you act. That's what makes you good at what you do. And that's what's going to win this case. You sound like Rita. Rita sounds smart. He gestured toward the house. Come on, I made chili. You're going to eat, then you're going to sleep. Then tomorrow, you're going to walk into that courtroom and show them exactly who Marcus Reeves is. And who's that? Someone who doesn't break. Someone who documents everything. Someone who builds things meant to last until he decides it's time to tear them down, safely and completely. James grinned. Someone who's about to ruin the Ashworths' entire week. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of November day that feels like a warning. I wore my best suit, not the Tom Ford from the party, which was still at the house I couldn't access, but a charcoal gray I'd bought years ago for a job interview. Professional? Understated. The uniform of someone who knew how to show up and do the work. David met me outside the courthouse. Ready? As I'll ever be. Remember, calm, factual, brief. Don't volunteer information. Don't get defensive. Just answer what's asked and nothing more. We climbed the steps together. Inside, the courthouse was exactly what you'd expect. Marble floors, uncomfortable benches, the smell of old paper and institutional cleaning products. People clustered in small groups, lawyers briefing clients in hushed voices, everyone waiting for their turn before judges who would decide their futures in 15-minute increments. Victoria was already there. She stood near the courtroom doors with her attorney, a woman in her 50s named Margaret Sinclair, who looked like she'd been born in a power suit. Victoria had been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked small and vulnerable, and exactly like someone who needed protection from an abusive spouse. I felt David's hand on my arm. Don't react. Don't approach. Don't even look at her if you can help it. She's acting. Of course she is, and she's good at it. But we have evidence. That matters more than performance. We took seats on the opposite side of the hallway. I kept my eyes forward, my hands folded in my lap, my breathing steady. Every technique Rita had taught me, every bit of control I'd learned over 15 years of working with live electricity. All rise. We filed into the courtroom. Judge Patricia Morrison presiding, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of face that suggested she'd heard every lie a lawyer could tell and wasn't impressed by any of them. This is an emergency hearing regarding a temporary order of protection, she said, settling behind the bench. Ms. Sinclair, you filed on behalf of your client. Make your case. Margaret Sinclair stood. Your Honor, my client Victoria Ashworth is here today because she fears for her safety. Her husband, Marcus Reeves, has engaged in a pattern of harassing and threatening behavior following his abrupt and aggressive departure from a family event 6 days ago. She laid out their version. The phone calls Victoria claimed I'd made, though she provided no evidence. The threatening messages I'd supposedly sent, though she provided no screenshots. The fear Victoria felt, though she offered nothing but her own tearful statement. My client simply wants peace, Sinclair concluded. She wants her husband to respect her boundaries while they navigate this difficult divorce. She's asking for a temporary order preventing Mr. Reeves from contacting her or coming near her residence for the duration of these proceedings. Judge Morrison looked at me. Mr. Chen, your response? David stood. Your Honor, everything Ms. Sinclair just described is fiction. And I can prove it. He presented our evidence methodically. Phone records showing 0 outgoing calls from my number to Victoria's. Screenshots of her 93 calls to me, none of which I answered. Text messages showing her family's attempts to reach me, to threaten me, to intimidate me into withdrawing the divorce filing. My client hasn't contacted his wife once since leaving that party, David said. In fact, he changed his phone number specifically to stop the harassment he was receiving from her and her family. If anyone in this courtroom needs protection, Your Honor, it's Marcus Reeves. Judge Morrison studied the documents. The courtroom was silent, except for the rustle of paper and the distant sound of traffic outside. Ms. Sinclair, the judge finally said, do you have any evidence contradicting what Mr. Chen just presented? Your Honor, my client's testimony is insufficient without corroborating evidence. I'm looking at phone records that clearly show your client made 93 calls to Mr. Reeves in a single day. I'm looking at text messages where Mrs. Reeves's father explicitly threatens to destroy Mr. Reeves financially and professionally. I'm looking at a voicemail where Mrs. Reeves tells her husband he's embarrassing himself and needs to come home and discuss his behavior. Judge Morrison closed the folder. This doesn't look like a woman in fear for her safety. This looks like a woman angry that she's been served divorce papers. Victoria made a small sound, not quite a sob, but close. Your Honor, Sinclair tried again, the emotional abuse my client has suffered can be addressed in the divorce proceedings, but this is an emergency hearing for a protective order, and I'm not seeing an emergency. I'm seeing two people in a contentious divorce. Judge Morrison looked at me directly. Mr. Reeves, you're ordered not to contact your wife except through legal counsel. You're not to go to the marital residence without prior arrangement and police escort to retrieve your belongings. Understood? Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Reeves, the same applies to you. No contact with your husband except through attorneys. If you feel genuinely threatened, call the police. Don't call him 93 times in 6 hours. The gavel came down. Petition for temporary protective order is denied. Court is adjourned. We stood. David was already packing up papers, moving efficiently. Behind us, I heard Victoria's voice, high and tight. This is ridiculous. He's dangerous. He walked out. Not another word, Judge Morrison said sharply. Not in my courtroom. Take it outside. We left through the side door. Once we were in the hallway, David let out a long breath. That went better than expected, he said. She denied the order. She didn't just deny it. She saw through their entire performance. That judge knows exactly what the Ashworths were trying to do, and she didn't buy it for a second. What happens now? Now they're going to be angry. They tried their first major play, and it failed publicly. They're going to regroup, come back harder. But, Marcus? David smiled. We just won the first round. And they know it. We walked out of the courthouse into weak November sunlight. Behind us, I heard voices. Victoria and her attorney, talking in urgent whispers. I didn't turn around. Didn't look back. James was waiting by his truck, parked illegally in front of a fire hydrant. Well? Order denied, I said. Hell yes. He pulled me into a brief hug. I knew you'd destroy them. We haven't destroyed anything yet. This is just round one. Then let's celebrate round one. Beer? It's 11 a.m. Perfect timing. James opened the truck door. Come on, you just made the Ashworths look like liars in front of a judge. That deserves at least one celebratory beer. David declined. He had another client, but promised to call later with next steps. James and I drove to a bar downtown that was mostly empty, except for third shift workers getting off and people like us who needed a drink before noon for reasons we didn't want to explain. To Marcus Reeves, James said, raising his bottle. The man who walked out of his own marriage wearing a badge that said Housekeeper and somehow turned it into a legal victory. We clinked bottles. The beer was cold and exactly what I needed. They're going to come at me harder now, I said. Let them. Every time they do, you document it. Every time they lie, you prove them wrong. Every time they underestimate you, you remind them why that's a mistake. James took a long drink. Marcus, you've spent 7 years being underestimated by these people. 7 years of them thinking you're just some guy who fixes their lights and doesn't understand how their world works. But here's what they didn't count on. You do understand. You understand systems. You understand documentation. You understand that power doesn't come from money or connections or intimidation. It comes from knowing exactly where the weak points are and how to exploit them. You think I'm exploiting weak points? I think you're an electrician who spent 18 months mapping out a circuit that's about to fail catastrophically. And when it does, you're going to be the only one who knows how to shut it down safely. He smiled. That's not exploitation. That's just good engineering. My phone buzzed. The new number. A text from David. They have requested expedited discovery. They want access to all your financial records, employment history, personal communications, standard procedure but aggressive timeline. We'll discuss strategy tomorrow. I showed James the message. What's discovery? He asked. It's where both sides share evidence, financial documents, emails, text messages, everything relevant to the case. And they want expedited, meaning fast. Meaning they're trying to bury us in paperwork while they look for anything they can use against me. Do they understand what they're asking for? James grinned. Do they understand that you've been documenting everything? That discovery works both ways? I felt something settle in my chest. Not quite satisfaction. More like the calm certainty that comes when you know you're about to reveal a truth that can't be hidden anymore. They're about to, I said. Good. James finished his beer. Because I've been working on something. Remember those Ashworth property files? The ones with the questionable inspections and the shell companies? Yeah. I found something interesting. Want to see? Always. He pulled out his phone, opened a photo. It was a bank statement. Not ours, not mine, someone else's entirely. How did you get this? I asked. I have a friend who works in commercial insurance. I asked him to pull the fire claim files for Clearwater Holdings. Public record once a claim is filed. And look at the payment dates. I looked, saw a pattern. Large insurance payouts followed by deposits into accounts I didn't recognize. Now look at this. Another photo. An invoice from an electrical contracting company I'd never heard of. Who's Arcadia Electric? That's the company that supposedly did the original electrical work on all these properties. The work that failed inspection but somehow got approved anyway. Want to know who owns Arcadia Electric? Who? James zoomed in on the bottom of the invoice. On the signature line, Lawrence Brennan, the city inspector. Charles Ashworth's college roommate. He's billing for work and then inspecting his own jobs, I said slowly. And passing them even when they're substandard. And then those buildings mysteriously have electrical fires, and then Ashworth's shell companies collect insurance money. It's fraud. All of it. And we can prove it. I stared at the photos. At the evidence of corruption so blatant, it seemed impossible anyone had gotten away with it. What do we do with this? I asked. Nothing. Yet. But if they come at you harder, if they try to destroy you like Charles promised, then we give this to the right people. And we watch their entire empire collapse. I thought about justice, about truth, about the difference between revenge and simply letting consequences catch up with people who'd been running from them too long. Hold on to it, I said, but don't show anyone, not yet. You're learning, James said. You're finally learning how to play their game. No, I corrected. I'm learning how to win. Discovery began Tuesday morning with a knock on James's door at 7 a.m. A process server handed me an envelope containing 53 pages of document requests. The Ashworths wanted everything. 5 years of tax returns, bank statements, credit card records, employment contracts, client lists, personal correspondence, social media posts, medical records, therapy notes, if any existed. They wanted my entire life reduced to paper and handed over for inspection. David called an hour later. You got the requests? Just finished reading them. They're fishing, hoping to find something, anything, they can use to paint you as financially irresponsible or emotionally unstable or secretly wealthy enough that you don't need spousal support. He paused. How clean are your records? Completely. I pay my taxes. I don't gamble. I don't have secret accounts or hidden assets. My business books are immaculate because I'm terrified of the IRS. Good. Then we comply fully. We give them everything they asked for and nothing they can twist. Another pause. But, Marcus, discovery works both ways. We get to request their documents too. And I'm thinking we should be very specific about what we ask for. What do you mean? I mean, Victoria's financial records are going to be interesting. Partner level salary, bonuses, investment accounts her parents probably helped fund. But more than that, I want communication records. Emails between her and her parents. Text messages. Any documentation of discussions about you, your marriage, or plans for the future. They'll fight that, claim it's privileged or irrelevant. Let them fight. Because every time they resist turning over evidence, they look like they're hiding something. And if they do turn it over, David's voice took on an edge, then we get to see exactly how long they've been planning this. How many conversations happened about the M situation? How many family meetings discussed your eventual removal from Victoria's life? I thought about the emails I'd already collected, the ones in my folder. I might have some of that already. I know you do, but we need it from official channels. We need it produced in discovery so it's admissible in court. Your screenshots are good for building our narrative. Official production from her attorneys is what wins cases. When do we file our requests? I'm drafting them now. We'll submit by end of week. In the meantime, start gathering your documents. I'll send over a checklist. The checklist arrived 20 minutes later. 42 categories of documents. I spent the rest of Tuesday pulling files from my office, my storage unit, the boxes in James's garage. Tax returns going back 7 years. Bank statements showing every deposit and withdrawal. Business invoices and receipts proving income. Personal files proving I was exactly who I claimed to be. Someone who worked hard, paid his bills, and documented everything. By Wednesday afternoon, I had 3 boxes ready for David. James helped me load them into his truck. This is insane, he said, looking at the volume. They asked for all this? Every piece. They want to see if I'm hiding money or lying about income or secretly running some kind of scheme. Are you? James, the most exciting thing in my financial life is a high-yield savings account that earns 1.3% interest. Boring. Exactly. I closed the tailgate. Which is going to disappoint them enormously when they spend hundreds of billable hours reviewing documents that prove I'm exactly what I said I was. An electrician who saved money and paid his mortgage. We delivered the boxes to David's office. Rita was waiting, already setting up a system for cataloging everything. This is going to take me days, she said, not unhappily. But it'll be worth it when their attorneys realize they've got nothing. How long until we get their documents? I asked David. They have 30 days to respond to our requests, but I'm betting they'll ask for an extension. Claim they need more time to compile everything. Standard delay tactic. So we wait. We wait. But while we're waiting, we prepare. I want you to write down everything you remember about your marriage, a timeline with dates if you have them. Every significant event, every argument, every moment where you felt diminished or excluded. We're building a narrative, and I need all the pieces. I spent the next 3 days writing, sitting in James's spare room with a legal pad, reconstructing 7 years of marriage in chronological order. Some memories were easy. The wedding, the house purchase, major holidays. Others required consulting my calendar, old photos, text messages to figure out when exactly things had shifted. The timeline became a map of slow erosion. Year 1, happy, optimistic, building a life together. Year 2, Victoria's career intensifying, more late nights, more weekend work. Year 3, her first promotion, her parents becoming more involved, subtle comments about my work being cute or blue collar. Year 4, the first time she went to a firm event without me, saying it was just colleagues. Year 5, her mother's texts beginning, the ones discussing whether I was right for Victoria's trajectory. Year 6, the distancing becoming obvious, the separate social lives, the feeling of being a guest in my own marriage. Year 7, the party, the badge, the end. Written out like this, it was impossible to miss the pattern. Impossible to deny what had been happening while I'd been too busy maintaining our life to notice our life was ending. Friday afternoon, David called. Their response to our discovery requests came early. And they're objecting to almost everything. They're claiming your requests are overly broad, unduly burdensome, and designed to harass rather than discover relevant information. We asked for the same things they asked for. I know, which makes their objections look ridiculous. We're filing a motion to compel. Judge Morrison is going to love this. He sounded almost gleeful. They're fighting so hard to hide their communications, Marcus, which tells me those communications are exactly as damaging as we think they are. When's the hearing? 2 weeks. December 3rd. We'll present our motion, they'll argue against it, and the judge will decide what they have to turn over. What are the odds she sides with us? Given how the protective order hearing went, I'd say 70-30 in our favor. Judge Morrison doesn't like games, and the Ashworths are playing games. The weekend brought an unexpected visitor. I was in James's garage Saturday morning, helping him rebuild a carburetor, when a silver Mercedes pulled into the driveway. I recognized the car immediately. Victoria's cousin, Andrew Ashworth. 32, corporate attorney, one of the few family members who'd ever treated me like a person instead of staff. You want me to tell him to leave? James asked, wiping grease from his hands. No, let's see what he wants. Andrew got out of the car slowly, hands visible, body language deliberately non-threatening. He looked tired, older than I remembered from the party. Marcus, he said, can we talk? Depends what you want to talk about. Not the divorce, not the legal stuff. Just, can we talk? 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. I looked at James. He shrugged. I'll be inside if you need me. Andrew and I stood in the driveway, November wind pulling leaves across the pavement between us. I'm not here on behalf of the family, he said. I want you to know that. They don't even know I'm here. Okay. I saw what happened at the party, the badge, the seating arrangement, all of it. And I didn't say anything. I watched them humiliate you, and I just sat there. I've been thinking about that all week. I waited. Victoria's my cousin. I love her. But Marcus, what they did to you was wrong. What they've been doing to you for years was wrong. I've watched it happen. Watched them treat you like you were beneath them. Like you didn't deserve to be part of the family. And I never called it out. I just went along with it because it was easier than causing problems. Why are you telling me this? Because I wanted you to know that someone saw. Someone knows you're not crazy or vindictive or any of the things they're saying you are. You're a good man who got treated like garbage by people who should have valued you. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. And because I wanted to give you this. I took the envelope. Inside were printouts of text messages. A group chat labeled family with 17 participants. I recognized all the names. Victoria's parents, her siblings, aunts and uncles, cousins. Everyone who'd been at that party. The messages started 3 weeks before the event. Eleanor Ashworth. Just finalizing details for V's party. Seating chart is mostly done. Question. Do we include Marcus at the family table or with the firm people? Charles Ashworth. Firm people. He'll be more comfortable there. Victoria. Actually, we might not need to seat him at all. I could use him to help coordinate with catering, make sure everything runs smoothly. He's good at that kind of thing. Eleanor. Perfect. I'll have badges made for all the help. Keep things organized. Andrew. Badges for the help? Mom? Marcus isn't staff. Eleanor. Of course not, darling. It's just a fun theme element. Everyone will have badges. But scrolling further, I saw that wasn't true. The badges discussed for other guests said things like Guest of Honor, VIP, Ashworth family. Only mine said Housekeeper. Victoria, 2 days before the party. Marcus doesn't know about the badge yet. Should I tell him or let it be a surprise? Eleanor. Let it be a surprise. If he objects, we can say it's all in fun. But honestly, he needs to understand his role in your life is changing. You're a partner now. You can't have a husband who doesn't fit the image. Charles. Agreed. This party is as much about establishing Victoria's new position as it is celebrating. Marcus needs to understand where he stands in that picture. Victoria. I know. It feels harsh. Eleanor. It's not harsh, darling. It's reality. You've outgrown him. Better he understands that now rather than later. I read through the entire conversation. 37 messages, planning my humiliation. Discussing it like a strategy. Agreeing that it was for the best and necessary, and honestly probably overdue. Victoria had known, had participated, had agreed that putting me in my place was the right move. I'm sorry, Andrew said. I'm sorry I didn't speak up in that chat. I'm sorry I didn't stop them. I'm sorry I didn't pull you aside at the party and warn you what was coming. Why are you giving this to me now? Because they're lying in court. They're saying the badge was innocent, that the seating was an oversight, that you overreacted to nothing. But this proves it was calculated. Planned, deliberate cruelty disguised as a party theme. He looked at me directly. And because you deserve to know the truth. Even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. I folded the printouts carefully, put them back in the envelope. Thank you. Will you use it in the divorce? I don't know yet, but I'll keep it. Add it to everything else. Everything else? I've been documenting for 18 months, Andrew. I have 300 pieces of evidence showing exactly how your family sees me. This just makes 306. He let out a long breath. Jesus, you really were preparing. I'm an electrician. We prepare for failures before they happen. And now the failure is happening. Now I'm managing it, safely and completely. I looked at the envelope. Does Victoria know you're here? No. And I'd appreciate if we kept it that way. I still have to live with these people. Still have to work with Charles. But, Marcus? He offered his hand. For what it's worth, I'm on your side. I can't say it publicly. Can't testify or anything that obvious. But I'm on your side. We shook hands. He drove away. I stood in the driveway holding evidence of a family group chat, planning my humiliation like a corporate strategy session. James came out of the house. What was that about? I showed him the printouts. He read through them in silence. When he finished, his jaw was tight. They planned it. They actually sat around planning how to humiliate you. They thought they were being strategic, managing a problem, making sure I understood my place in Victoria's new life. Your place is what? Her employee? Her former employee, someone being phased out, given a severance package in the form of public humiliation. I looked at the text messages again, at Victoria's words. It feels harsh, but not harsh enough to stop, not harsh enough to defend me, just harsh enough to feel a moment of guilt before going along with her mother's plan. Are you going to use this? James asked. David needs to see it. After that, it's up to him. We went inside. I scanned the printouts, emailed them to David with a brief explanation of how I'd received them. His response came back within minutes. This is gold. This proves premeditation. Proves they knew exactly what they were doing and did it anyway. I'm adding it to our evidence file. Thank you. I spent the rest of Saturday trying not to think about the group chat. Trying not to imagine Victoria and her family sitting around discussing me like I was a PR problem to be managed. Trying not to feel the weight of knowing that the woman I'd loved for 7 years had actively participated in planning my public humiliation because her mother thought it was necessary. Sunday, I called my mother for the first time since the party. She lived in Florida now, had moved there after my father died. We talked maybe once a month, usually brief check-ins about her health and my work. I hadn't told her about the divorce yet, hadn't been ready to explain it. Marcus, she answered warmly. This is a surprise. Sunday afternoon calls. Are you okay? Not really, but I'm handling it. What happened? So I told her about the party, the badge, the divorce filing, about Victoria and her family and the discovery process, about evidence and attorneys in fighting for what I was owed. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I never liked her, she finally said. Mom, I know. I kept my mouth shut because you loved her, and I wanted you to be happy. But Marcus, I never liked how she looked at you. Like you were a project she was working on. Like you needed to be improved or fixed or managed. You never said anything. Because you wouldn't have heard it. You were in love. You had to figure it out yourself. A sigh. I'm sorry it took something this cruel for you to see it. Me too. But now that you have seen it, what are you going to do? Fight. Take what's mine. Make sure she understands what she lost. Good. Your father would be proud. He always said the most dangerous thing in the world was a careful man who finally decided he was done being careful. She paused. You need money? I've got some saved. No, Mom, I'm okay. The business is solid. I have savings. I just needed to hear your voice. You've got it. Anytime you need it. And, Marcus? Yeah? Make them pay. Not in a mean way. Just make them understand that you're not nothing. You're not the help. You're a man who built a life and a business and a home with his own 2 hands, and that's worth more than all their money and their connections and their country club memberships combined. I'm trying. You're not trying. You're doing. There's a difference. Her voice softened. I love you. Call me more often. Let me know you're okay. I will. Love you too. I hung up feeling lighter, feeling like maybe I wasn't crazy for fighting this hard over what everyone else seemed to think was just a bad party and hurt feelings. James found me on the back porch an hour later. You good? Getting there. Good. Because I've been thinking about the discovery hearing coming up. About what happens when the judge forces them to turn over their communications. What about it? They're going to sanitize everything, delete what they can, claim they can't find certain files, accidentally lose text messages. You know they will. Probably. Unless we already have copies, unless we can prove what existed before they had a chance to destroy it. James pulled out his phone. Andrew gave you that group chat. But group chats have metadata, timestamps, participant lists. If we document exactly what he gave you, exact dates, exact messages, exact participants, then when they produce their discovery and stuff is missing, we can prove they destroyed evidence. That's spoliation. That's a crime. Exactly. And judges hate it. Like, really hate it. Career-ending hate it. He grinned. So, let's make sure we document everything we have right now. Before they know we have it. Before they have a chance to make it disappear. We spent the next 2 hours cataloging evidence. Every screenshot, every email, every text message in my folder. We created checksums and timestamps and backup copies stored in 3 different locations. We built a record of exactly what existed as of November 23rd, 2025, before the Ashworths knew how much evidence had leaked. This is paranoid, I said around hour 3. This is smart, James corrected. These people have already lied to a judge once. They'll do it again if they think they can get away with it. We're just making sure they can't. By Sunday evening, we had everything documented, backed up, and secured. David had copies. Rita had copies. James had copies on an encrypted drive he kept in a safe. I had copies on a hard drive I'd hidden in a storage unit the Ashworths didn't know existed. We were ready for whatever came next. Monday morning brought another envelope, hand-delivered by courier. Inside was a settlement offer from the Ashworths. They were offering me $50,000 and my personal belongings if I agreed to withdraw the divorce petition and sign a post-nuptial agreement restructuring the marriage on more appropriate terms. The postnup was attached. 12 pages of legal language that boiled down to, Victoria keeps everything she earns, I waive all rights to spousal support or equitable distribution of assets, and if we ever divorce in the future, I leave with exactly what I brought into the marriage and nothing more. $50,000 to erase 7 years of partnership. $50,000 to agree that I'd contributed nothing, earned nothing, deserved nothing. $50,000 to become officially what they'd always seen me as. The help. I called David. I got it too, he said. Insulting, isn't it? It's something. You want to counter? No. I want to reject it completely. I want them to know that $50,000 doesn't even begin to approach what I'm owed. Not financially, not morally, not in any universe where fairness exists. Then I'll draft a rejection. We'll make it clear you're not interested in settlement unless it reflects actual equitable distribution. How much is actual equitable distribution? Based on what you've contributed? The house appreciation you created through renovations? The financial support you provided while she built her career? Conservatively, you're looking at $300,000 minimum. Maybe more if we can prove emotional damages. $300,000 versus $50,000. The difference between recognition and insult. Tell them no, I said. Tell them we'll see them in court. With pleasure. That evening, I sat in James's spare room with all my evidence spread around me. 306 pieces of documentation. A timeline spanning 7 years. Phone records and text messages and emails, and now a group chat proving premeditation. A case so solid that even I, who'd built it piece by piece over 18 months, was impressed by its completeness. Victoria thought she'd married beneath her, thought she'd partnered with someone too simple to understand her world, too unsophisticated to fight back properly. too grateful for her attention to demand actual respect. She'd been wrong about all of it. Tomorrow, David would file our rejection of the settlement offer. In 2 weeks, we'd be back in court fighting for access to their communications. In a few months, maybe a year, a judge would decide how our 7 years together got divided. But tonight, in this spare room surrounded by evidence, I knew something Victoria and her family hadn't figured out yet. I wasn't going to lose. Because I'd learned something in 15 years of electrical work. Something about systems and failures and how to manage them safely. You can't fix something that's broken at its foundation. You can't patch over a failed circuit and hope it holds. Sometimes the only solution is to shut down the whole system, trace every failure back to its source, and rebuild from ground up. That's what I was doing. Not destroying their lives, not seeking revenge, just shutting down a failed system and making sure everyone understood exactly why it failed. The truth, presented clearly and completely. Justice, not revenge. But from where they were standing, it probably looked the same. The rejection of their settlement offer hit the Ashworths like a circuit breaker tripping. I knew because Victoria's new attorney, they'd upgraded from Margaret Sinclair to someone named Robert Hastings, senior partner at a firm that represented Fortune 500 companies, called David within an hour of receiving our response. David put him on speakerphone so I could listen. "This is unreasonable," Hastings said without preamble. His voice was expensive, the kind that charged by the syllable. "Your client is rejecting a generous offer for what? Pride? This is going to cost him more in legal fees than he'd gain in settlement." "Mr. Hastings, my client isn't interested in your characterization of generosity. $50,000 for 7 years of marriage, plus signing away all future claims? That's not generous. That's insulting. Your client is an electrician asking for $300,000 from a woman who earned every penny of her success through her own work. He's not entitled to her achievements. He's entitled to equitable distribution of marital assets accumulated during their partnership, which includes the increased value of their home, a home he personally renovated, which includes consideration for the financial support he provided while she built her career, which includes partnership." Hastings laughed, not pleasantly. "Mr. Chen, let's be honest. Your client married above his station, and now he's attempting to leverage that marriage into a payday. This is gold digging, pure and simple." I felt David tense beside me. I put a hand on his arm, shook my head, let him talk. "Mr. Hastings, I'm going to say this once. Marcus Reeves documented 7 years of contributions to this marriage. Financial, emotional, and material. We have receipts, we have bank statements, we have evidence of systematic exclusion and diminishment by his wife and her family. So when you call him a gold digger, you're not just insulting my client. You're building our case for emotional damages." "Emotional damages?" Hastings sounded amused. "Good luck proving that. We'll see you in court on December 3rd. Enjoy reviewing the evidence your client has been trying so hard not to produce." David hung up. I sat back in the leather chair. "Gold digger? He's trying to get under your skin, make you angry enough to accept a low settlement just to end the fight." David made notes on his legal pad. "It's a tactic. Not a particularly sophisticated one, but a tactic. It's also what they really think." "Of course it is. They've thought it all along. The difference is now they're saying it on recorded attorney calls, which we can reference in court if needed." He looked at me. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. Marcus." "I am. Really. They can call me whatever they want. Gold digger, opportunist, someone who married above his station. Every insult just proves what I've been saying all along. They never saw me as an equal. They never saw our marriage as a partnership. And that's the case. That is the case. David closed his folder. But I need to warn you, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Hastings isn't cheap. The Ashworths bringing him in means they're serious about fighting. Which means discovery is going to be brutal, depositions are going to be hostile, and every step of this process is designed to break you down until you accept whatever scraps they're willing to throw. Then they're going to be disappointed. Good, because the hearing is in 9 days and we need to be ready. Preparing for the December 3rd discovery hearing became my full-time job. David had me review every document request, every objection the Ashworths had filed, every argument we'd be making about why the judge should compel them to produce their communications. This is about the group chat, David explained on Tuesday, and the emails between Victoria and her mother, and any texts discussing you, your marriage, or their plans for your eventual removal. They're fighting production because they know it's damaging. We need to convince Judge Morrison that those communications are directly relevant to the question of how you were treated in this marriage. They are relevant. I know, but we have to prove it, which means explaining to the judge why texts between Victoria and her mother about the M situation matter to questions of asset division. Because they show I was never considered a partner. Because they show the marriage was ending long before I filed. Because they show premeditation and planning for my exclusion. Exactly. Now, say it like that in court, and we'll win. We practiced my testimony again. Rita timing my responses, David playing hostile attorney, both of them coaching me to stay calm and factual, even when the questions were designed to provoke. Mr. Reeves, isn't it true that you were jealous of your wife's success? No. I was proud of her success. I supported it by handling household responsibilities and working flexible hours so she could focus on her career. But you resented her making more money than you. I never resented her income. What I resented was being treated as less valuable because I earned less. Treated as less valuable by whom? By her family. And, eventually, by her. Can you prove that? Yes. I have documentation showing a pattern of exclusion and diminishment spanning multiple years. Over and over, the same questions in different forms. Each time, I got better at answering without emotion, without defensiveness, without giving them anything they could twist into evidence of instability or bitterness. By Wednesday, Rita declared me ready. You sound like a professional witness. Clear, direct, unshakable. If they put you on the stand, you'll do fine. If discovery hearings don't always involve witness testimony. Sometimes it's just the attorneys arguing about documents. But if the judge wants to hear from you directly about why these communications matter, you'll be prepared. Thursday morning brought an unexpected development. James's phone rang while we were reviewing property files. He'd been digging deeper into the Ashworth real estate holdings, finding more irregularities, more suspicious patterns. He answered, listened for a moment, then his expression changed. Are you sure? When? A pause. Okay. Yeah, I'll tell him. He hung up, looked at me with something between concern and excitement. That was my contact in commercial insurance, the one who pulled the Clearwater Holdings fire claim files. What about them? Someone else requested the same files yesterday. Someone from a law firm called Morrison and Associates. Morrison? I thought for a second. Wait, it's not the Ashworth's firm, and it's not David's firm. James pulled up something on his laptop. I looked them up. Morrison and Associates specializes in insurance fraud investigation. They represent insurance companies in litigation. The implication settled slowly, like dust finding places to land. Someone's investigating the Ashworths. I said. Someone's investigating the fire claims. Which means someone else noticed the pattern. Which means we're not the only ones who found the fraud. Who requested the files? The request came through the State Insurance Commission, official channel. My contact says there's been a formal complaint filed about suspicious claim patterns involving properties inspected by Lawrence Brennan. I sat down. Someone reported them, and now it's being investigated, officially, by people with subpoena power and criminal prosecution authority. James closed the laptop. Marcus, this changes things. If the Ashworths are facing insurance fraud charges, then they have bigger problems than my divorce. I thought about Charles Ashworth's threat to destroy me, about his confidence, his certainty that he had resources I couldn't match. Does David know? Not yet. You want me to call him? Yeah, he needs to know what's happening, because if the Ashworths are about to be criminally investigated, that affects how they're going to fight this divorce. James made the call. David answered, listened, asked James to send him everything he had on the insurance claims and the investigation request. This is interesting, Ming, David said when James put him on speaker. Very interesting. Marcus, has anyone from the Ashworth family tried to contact you in the past few days? No. Radio silence since Hastings called you. Keep it that way, because if they're facing criminal exposure, they might try to make a deal, offer you a better settlement in exchange for your silence about what you know regarding their properties. I don't know anything, not officially, just what James found. But they don't know what you know. For all they know, you've been documenting their business practices the same way you documented your marriage. And if you have evidence of fraud, and if you're willing to share it with investigators. David paused, letting the implication hang. That makes you dangerous. I'm already dangerous to them. I'm trying to take $300,000. $300,000 is a rounding error for Charles Ashworth. But a fraud conviction? Prison time? The collapse of his entire real estate empire? That's existential. That's the end of everything they've built. Another pause. Be careful, Marcus. People fight hardest when they have the most to lose. Friday afternoon, I violated my own rule and drove past the house. Our house. The one I'd bought and renovated and lived in for 5 years. The one I wasn't allowed to enter without police escort. It looked the same from the outside. Blue shutters I'd painted last spring. Front porch I'd rebuilt. Garden beds I'd prepared for winter. Everything exactly as I'd left it 8 days ago when I'd driven to that party thinking I was celebrating my wife's success. A lifetime ago. Victoria's car was in the driveway. I saw movement behind the living room curtains. Her, probably. Or maybe her mother had come to stay with her. To comfort her through this difficult time when her husband had the audacity to ask for what he'd earned. I didn't stop. Just drove past slowly, looking at a place that used to be home and was now just another asset to be divided by attorneys and assigned a dollar value by judges who'd never seen me install those smart lights or rewire that kitchen or spend 3 weekends waterproofing that basement. My phone buzzed. Text from David. Can you come to the office? Something you need to see. I drove to the brownstone. David met me in the conference room with Rita and a stack of papers that hadn't been there this morning. What is this? I asked. Their latest motion, filed an hour ago. David's expression was grim. They're requesting a psychological evaluation. They want a court-appointed psychiatrist to assess your mental state. My mental state. They're arguing that your behavior, the sudden divorce filing, the extensive documentation, the refusal to negotiate, indicates possible psychological issues that the court should be aware of before making determinations about asset division. I sat down heavily. They're calling me crazy. They're calling you potentially unstable, which is different legally but amounts to the same thing. Rita pushed a section of the motion toward me. Read this part. I read. Petitioner's obsessive documentation of ordinary marital interactions, his misinterpretation of routine family dynamics as deliberate exclusion, and his extreme reaction to what was, at most, a minor social awkwardness at a family celebration, raise serious questions about his psychological state and ability to accurately perceive reality. The court should consider whether petitioner's claims are based on objective facts or on distorted perceptions driven by underlying mental health issues. I couldn't find words. This is gaslighting. Legal gaslighting. Yes, David said simply. That's exactly what it is. They're trying to make your documentation look like paranoia. Your evidence look like obsession. Your legitimate grievances look like delusion. Will it work? Not if we fight it correctly. We're going to file an opposition arguing that psychological evaluation is inappropriate, absent evidence of actual mental illness, which they haven't provided. What they've provided is evidence that you're organized and methodical, which, last time I checked, isn't a mental disorder. But if the judge orders the evaluation, then you take it and you pass it. Because Marcus, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not delusional. You're not paranoid. You're not mentally ill. You're someone who documented abuse and finally had enough. Any competent psychologist will see that immediately. And if they find an incompetent psychologist, then we get a second opinion, then we fight, then we win anyway because we have evidence and they have accusations. David leaned forward. Listen to me. This motion is desperation. They're throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. First, the restraining order failed. Then, the low settlement offer rejected. Now they're trying to paint you as unstable. When this fails, they'll try something else. But each failure makes them look worse and our case stronger. How many failures before they give up? People like the Ashworths, they don't give up. They just run out of tactics. He smiled thinly. We're 3 tactics in, and we haven't lost yet. I'd say we're doing pretty well. Saturday, I did something I hadn't done in 7 years. I went to a bar alone. Not the quiet place with James, where we drank beer and talked strategy. A real bar. The kind with sports on TV and music too loud, and people who weren't there to solve problems, just to forget them for a while. I sat at the far end of the bar, nursing a whiskey and watching a football game I didn't care about. The bartender was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the efficiency of someone who'd worked the service industry for decades. Rough week? She asked, refilling my glass without being asked. Rough month? Want to talk about it? Not really. Good. Most people who want to talk shouldn't, and most people who should won't. She wiped down the bar. But if you change your mind, I'm here till close. I didn't change my mind. Just sat there with my whiskey and my thoughts, and the comfortable anonymity of being somewhere nobody knew my name or my story, or why I was drinking alone on a Saturday night. My phone stayed in my pocket. David had copies of everything. James knew where I was. Nobody else needed to reach me. Nobody else had the right to reach me. Around 11, a woman sat down 2 stools away. Mid-30s, professional looking even in casual clothes. She ordered wine, pulled out her phone, stared at it with the expression of someone who'd just received bad news. Rough week? I asked, echoing the bartender. She looked up, surprised, then laughed. Rough year. Divorce. It was final yesterday. Congratulations? Thanks, I think. She raised her glass. To the end of marriages that should have ended sooner. I raised mine. To clarity? To clarity. We drank. She looked at me more carefully. You're going through one too. How'd you know? You have the look, like you're still figuring out who you are without the other person. She turned her glass in slow circles. How far along are you? Filed 2 weeks ago. Discovery phase. Probably 6 months from final. Ouch. Mine took 8 months and nearly bankrupted me. Lawyers are expensive. So I'm learning. Worth it, though, once it's over. Once you're finally free. She smiled sadly. I spent 3 years in marriage counseling trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. Wish I'd just filed for divorce and saved myself the time. What made you finally file? I realized I was living for someone else, making myself smaller so they could feel bigger. And one day I just stopped. Decided I'd rather be alone and myself than partnered and diminished. She finished her wine. Best decision I ever made, even though it hurt like hell. We talked for another hour about divorce and lawyers and the strange process of untangling a life you'd built with someone who turned out to be someone else entirely. She didn't ask my name. I didn't ask hers. Just two people in a bar sharing war stories about battles we'd each chosen to fight. When she left, she squeezed my shoulder. You'll get through this. And, on the other side, you'll remember who you were before they tried to convince you that you weren't enough. I stayed until closing, tipped the bartender extra, drove back to James's house in the cold November night, and thought about being smaller so someone else could feel bigger. About spending 7 years maintaining someone else's life while forgetting to build my own. About the person I'd been before Victoria convinced me that her world was more important than mine, her career more valuable than my work, her family more worth accommodating than my own dignity. I'd been an electrician who took pride in his work, who built systems that lasted, who solved problems other people couldn't solve, who was good at what he did and didn't need external validation to know it. Somewhere in 7 years of marriage, I'd forgotten that. But I remembered now. Sunday morning, I woke to my phone ringing. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Marcus? A woman's voice, not Victoria. Older, uncertain. Speaking? This is Patricia Chen, David's wife. Mrs. Chen, is everything okay? David's fine. I wanted to call you myself, to tell you something. A pause. David doesn't usually talk about his cases. He keeps work separate. But last night at dinner, he told me about you. About what you're fighting for. About the evidence you've collected and the way you've handled yourself. I waited, not sure where this was going. He said you remind him of why he became a lawyer. Why he takes these cases, because most people facing what you're facing would have given up by now, would have taken the $50,000 and walked away. But you're fighting for something bigger than money. You're fighting to be seen. Her voice wavered slightly. And I wanted you to know that someone sees you, that your fight matters, that what you're doing, standing up for yourself after years of being made to feel like you don't matter, is brave. I felt something catch in my throat. Thank you. David's going to win this case. He's one of the best attorneys in the state, and he believes in you completely. But even if things don't go perfectly, even if the outcome isn't everything you hope for, I want you to know that you already won. Because you stopped accepting less than you deserve. You stopped making yourself smaller. And that's a victory nobody can take away. We talked for a few more minutes. She told me about their daughter who was in medical school, about how David had helped them through challenges in their own marriage years ago, about the importance of fighting for what matters, even when it's hard. When we hung up, I sat in the spare room holding my phone and thinking about victories that couldn't be measured in dollars or assets or court rulings. About the victory of finally saying no. About the victory of refusing to be diminished anymore. About the victory of standing in a ballroom in front of 370 people, taking off a wedding ring, and walking away from something that was killing me slowly. Tuesday was December 3rd, the discovery hearing. The next battle in a war I was slowly, carefully winning. The Ashworths thought I was fighting for money. They were wrong. I was fighting for something they'd never understand because they'd never lacked it. The simple right to exist as a full person instead of as someone's employee, someone's project, someone's eventual embarrassment. The right to be seen. And I was going to make them see me, whether they wanted to or not. December 3rd arrived gray and cold, the kind of morning that feels like a warning. I wore the same charcoal suit from the restraining order hearing, drank coffee that tasted like anxiety, and arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early because David insisted on preparation time. They're going to argue burden, he said in the hallway outside Judge Morrison's courtroom. They're going to claim that producing their family communications would require them to search thousands of messages, that it's invasive and unnecessary. We counter that they've already demonstrated a pattern of discussing you and family communications, which makes those communications directly relevant. In the group chat Andrew gave me, we mention its existence without revealing we have it. We tell the judge we have reason to believe family group communications exist discussing your role in Victoria's life and the planning of the November party. We ask them to produce all group chats involving Victoria and her family members for the past 2 years. They'll know someone leaked. Let them know. Let them panic about who's talking. Panic makes people careless. The courtroom filled slowly. Victoria arrived with Robert Hastings and 2 associates carrying banker's boxes. Their version of evidence, though David had already told me it was mostly filler designed to look impressive. Victoria wore black, looked appropriately serious, didn't meet my eyes. Her parents sat in the gallery behind her. Eleanor in pearls. Charles in a suit that probably cost more than my truck. Both of them watching me with the cold assessment of people calculating whether I was still a manageable problem or had become an actual threat. All rise. Judge Morrison entered, settled behind her bench with the efficiency of someone who'd heard every argument before and wasn't impressed by any of them. This is a motion to compel discovery, she began. Mr. Chen, you're asking the respondent to produce communications between family members. Ms. Ashworth's counsel has objected. Make your case. David stood, presented our argument in clear, measured language, explained the pattern of exclusion, referenced the party, the badge, the systematic treatment of me as less than, argued that family communications were directly relevant to understanding the power dynamics of our marriage. Hastings countered with burden and privacy. Claim fishing expedition. Suggested I was trying to embarrass Victoria's family rather than prove legitimate claims. Your Honor, David said calmly, we have reason to believe that a family group chat exists in which the November 19th party was explicitly planned, including discussions of how to seat or not seat my client. We are not fishing. We are requesting specific, relevant communications that go to the heart of this case. Judge Morrison looked at Hastings. Does such a group chat exist? A pause. Too long. My client would need to check. I'm asking you, counselor, does a family group chat exist where Mr. Reeves was discussed? Another pause. Potentially. Then you'll produce it, along with any emails or text messages between Mrs. Reeves and her parents discussing Mr. Reeves, their marriage, or plans regarding their relationship. You have 14 days. The gavel came down. Next case. We walked out victorious. Behind us, I heard Charles Ashworth's voice, low and angry. Find out who talked. Too late, I thought. The damage was already done. The 14 days waiting for the Ashworths to produce their communications felt longer than the entire 2 weeks since I'd filed for divorce. David warned me they'd use every hour, every minute, hoping I'd lose patience or nerve or both. They're also sanitizing, he said over coffee on day 3, deleting what they can, editing what they can't. By the time we get their production, it'll be the cleanest version of their communications they can possibly provide. But we have Andrew's version, the real one, which will compare to what they produce, and every missing message, every edited conversation, every accidentally deleted text becomes evidence of spoliation. David smiled grimly. They think they're protecting themselves. They're actually building our case. James spent the waiting period diving deeper into the Ashworth real estate empire. The insurance investigation was progressing. He'd heard through his contact that subpoenas had been issued to 3 different property management companies linked to Charles Ashworth's holdings. They're in trouble, James said on day 7, showing me documents he probably shouldn't have had access to. Real trouble, the kind that ends with indictments. How long until that's public? Months, maybe. These investigations move slow, but the evidence is solid. Fire claims totaling $2.3 million over 10 years. Every single property inspected by Lawrence Brennan. Every single inspection passing despite substandard work. The pattern is impossible to ignore. Does Victoria know? If she doesn't, she will soon. Because investigators are going to want to interview family members, see who knew what and when. James closed his laptop. Question is, did Victoria know? Was she part of it? I thought about that. About Victoria at family dinners, at holiday gatherings, at Sunday brunches where business was always discussed. About her legal training, her sharp mind, her attention to detail. She knew, I said quietly. Maybe not the specifics, but she knew something wasn't right with her father's business. She's too smart not to have noticed. Which makes her potentially complicit. Which makes her desperate. I looked at the calendar. 7 more days until production. They're going to fight harder now, because this isn't just about our divorce anymore. It's about survival. Day 14 arrived like a storm that had been building on the horizon. David called at 8 a.m. Production just arrived. 4 boxes. Rita's going through it now, but you should come to the office. We need to compare what they sent versus what we already have. I was there in 20 minutes. Rita had converted David's conference room into a war room. Documents spread across every surface, organized by date and type. Emails in one section, text messages in another. The group chat, or what remained of it, in a third pile that looked notably thin. They gutted it, Rita said without preamble. The family group chat? They produced maybe 30% of what actually existed. See these dates? She pointed to gaps in the timeline. November 1st through November 15th is completely missing. The 2 weeks before the party, the exact period when they would have been planning everything. And they're claiming what? They just don't have those messages? They're claiming the messages were routine family coordination and not relevant to the divorce proceedings. Rita's expression was sharp. Which is interesting because they produced messages from October and late November, just not the crucial planning period. David was on his phone in the corner, taking notes. When he hung up, he looked satisfied. That was Andrew Ashworth, Victoria's cousin. He's willing to provide a sworn affidavit that the group chat contained extensive discussions about the party planning, including specific conversations about your seating and the name badge. He's willing to testify that those messages existed and that he has screenshots proving it. He'll do that? Testify against his own family? He says he's done watching them lie, says what they did to you was unconscionable, and he won't be part of covering it up. David pulled out a legal pad. With his testimony and the screenshots he provided, we can prove spoliation, destruction of evidence. That's serious, Marcus. Judges don't forgive that. We spent the day comparing Andrew's version of the group chat against what the Ashworths had produced. The differences were stark. Entire conversations missing. Damaging statements edited or removed. The sanitized version painted a picture of a family planning a pleasant celebration. The real version showed calculated cruelty. Rita documented every discrepancy in a spreadsheet. Message timestamps that didn't match. Participant lists that had been altered. Responses to deleted messages that now made no sense without context. This is devastating, she said around hour 4. This isn't just incomplete production. This is active fraud. Can we prove they deleted intentionally? I asked. With Andrew's testimony? Yes. He'll swear these messages existed. We have his screenshots showing they existed. And they produced a version claiming these dates contained no relevant communications. David looked up from his notes. That's not an accident. That's not an oversight. That's deliberate destruction of evidence ordered by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Victoria? Or her parents, or their attorney? Doesn't matter who gave the order. They're all responsible. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. You're making a mistake. This doesn't have to be ugly. Call me. Charles. I showed David. Don't respond, he said immediately. That's witness tampering. He's trying to negotiate outside legal channels, which is prohibited once litigation has begun. Save the message. We'll add it to our motion. Motion? Emergency motion for sanctions based on spoliation of evidence. We're filing tomorrow. We're going to ask Judge Morrison to impose penalties for their destruction of evidence. And Marcus? David's smile was cold. In spoliation cases, judges are allowed to assume that destroyed evidence would have been favorable to the other party, which means the judge can legally assume that every deleted message proved exactly what we're claiming, that your exclusion was planned, deliberate, and cruel. I looked at Charles's text again. At his certainty that I could be managed, controlled, bought off, or scared into submission. He still didn't understand what he was dealing with. Still didn't understand that I'd spent 18 months preparing for exactly this moment. Still didn't understand that every lie they told, every piece of evidence they destroyed, every attempt to intimidate or manipulate me just made my case stronger. File the motion, I said. Let's end this. The emergency hearing happened 3 days later. Judge Morrison read our motion in silence, then looked at Hastings with an expression that could freeze water. Counselor, your client produced a group chat missing 2 critical weeks of messages. Mr. Chen has a witness willing to testify those messages existed and contained discussions about deliberately excluding Mr. Reeves from family seating at the November event. Explain. Hastings stood slowly. Your Honor, there may have been some confusion in the document collection process. Confusion, Judge Morrison's voice could cut glass, or destruction. We would never. You produced October messages. You produced late November messages. But the 2 weeks when the party was planned are completely absent. That's not confusion, Mr. Hastings. That's spoliation. She closed the file. I'm imposing sanctions. $50,000 to be paid to Mr. Reeves for litigation costs. And I'm instructing the jury, should this go to trial, that they may assume destroyed evidence would have been favorable to Mr. Reeves's claims. Victoria's face went white. Additionally, I'm granting Mr. Chen's motion to compel complete production. Every message, every email, every communication. And if I find one more accidentally deleted conversation, I'll hold your client in contempt. The gavel came down. You have 48 hours. The complete production arrived in 6 boxes. Everything we'd suspected, confirmed. Eleanor's emails calling me unsuitable for Victoria's trajectory. Charles's texts about managing the Marcus problem. Victoria's messages to friends saying she'd outgrown her marriage, but couldn't figure out how to extract herself gracefully. Years of evidence. Years of planning. Years of them deciding I wasn't enough while benefiting from everything I provided. David called me at 11 p.m. on day 49 of my divorce. They wanted to settle. For how much? Everything you asked for. The house, full equity distribution, $300,000, and a non-disclosure agreement they're desperate for you to sign. Non-disclosure about what? About everything. The party, the evidence, the group chat. They're terrified this becomes public, especially with the insurance investigation heating up. They can't afford another scandal. I thought about it. About Victoria and her parents and their carefully constructed world built on image and connections and the certainty that people like me could be managed. No NDA, I said. I'll take the settlement, but I won't agree to stay silent. Marcus, that's a lot of money to leave on the table. They'll pay more for your silence. I don't want their money for my silence. I want what I'm owed for 7 years of partnership. That's it. I looked out the window of James's spare room. They can keep their secrets. I'm not interested in exposing them, but I won't sign something that says I have to pretend it didn't happen. David was quiet for a moment. You're sure? I'm sure. The final settlement was signed on December 28th. Divorce finalized on January 15th. I kept the house, got my $300,000, walked away from 7 years of marriage with exactly what I'd contributed, finally recognized and valued. Victoria's parents were indicted 3 months later. Insurance fraud. Charles took a plea deal, 5 years, out in 3 with good behavior. Eleanor got probation and community service. Victoria wasn't charged, but her partnership at the firm was quietly terminated. Something about family complications and needing to focus on personal matters. I didn't feel satisfaction when I heard. Didn't feel vindication or joy or even relief. Just felt free. I'm writing this from my home office, the one I built with custom shelving and perfect lighting. James is downstairs installing new kitchen cabinets. We're expanding the business, taking on bigger projects, building something that matters. Sometimes I think about that name badge. About standing in a ballroom wearing a label that said I was less than human. They thought they'd put me in my place that night. They were right. My place was somewhere better. Somewhere I was valued. Somewhere I didn't have to make myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. Somewhere I was finally, completely myself.